the West Sacramento City Council Redevelopment Successor Agency and Financing Authority, May 19th meeting. And we will proceed with the Pledge of Allegiance, which will be led by Ms. Elena Ledesma.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Ms. Ledesma. Really appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Pursuant to the Governor's Executive Order N-29-20, members of the West Sacramento City Council and staff will participate in this meeting via Zoom. To reduce the spread of COVID-19, members of the public are asked to watch the meeting via live stream on the city's website or wave cable. We will have live public comment and we will continue to receive comments, and all comments received by 6 p.m. will be provided to the City Council and posted on the website. To provide a live public comment during the meeting, join the meeting using the Zoom meeting hyperlinked or the phone number listed on the city's website. I will request public comment during item 1A prior to the first item on consent and after the staff presentation for any other item on the agenda. Once I have announced the public comment period, if you would like to make a comment, please do one of the following. If you are joining the meeting via Zoom, press the raise hand button, or if you are joining the meeting by phone, press *9. And when it is your turn to comment, the clerk will call you by name or phone number and will unmute your microphone. Each person will be allowed 3 minutes. The clerk will notify you when you have 30 seconds remaining to wrap up your comments. And once your 3 minutes or your public comment has ended, you will be muted again. You may also join by phone, dialing 1-669-900-9128. And the ID number is 920-9564-2935. And the passcode is 004264. We did not have a closed session tonight, and so we don't have anything to report on closed session. Next item on the agenda is item 1A, which are presentations by the public on matters not included on the agenda. And council members are prohibited from discussing on any matter presented under this item. Madam Clerk, do we have anything in writing or a live public comment request?
Council and members of the public. Yes, Mayor, we received one public comment, written public comment tonight.
Okay, a written public comment. And then I see a hand up at this point. Maria Grijalva, are you asking to speak under public comment?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak. I just wanted to make a friendly reminder to the City Council that since 2018, the City Council has had the option to switch to single-member districts, and at-large elections are not good for the community, and single-member districts is the way we should have. And so since 2018, the City Council has had the option to switch to single-member districts. And as we know, Councilman Orozco and Councilman Ledesma have not wanted this. And so I wanted to make a friendly reminder that it's important that we switch to single-member districts, and that this has been on the table for the longest time, and that at-large elections, once again, I should remind everyone, are remnants of Jim Crow laws. Thank you so much for this opportunity to speak. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Are there any other comments to speak?
Nobody else, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. And if anybody from our staff would like to be in touch to address this issue, you're more than welcome to do so, to provide any clarification on the status of our situation. And with that, we'll go on to our consent items. We have 2 through 11. Are there any requests to remove any consent items?
I'm sorry, Madam Mayor. Should we do the reports from members of the council?
Yes.
Members, yes, the council communication. Sorry, next is item 1B, council communications from our assignments. And Council Member Orozco, please present your report.
I'm willing to go. All righty. I have a report from our YOLO housing meeting, and there was a further follow-up from the conversation in that meeting that involves the Board of Supervisors. In the meeting we had with YOLO Housing, we talked about project home key and room key, specifically room key, and where each of the jurisdictions currently is with respect to the populations of people currently housed. And then we know that as of June 2021, the funding is set to expire. We need to make a decision as to what we do moving forward. We did discuss, and I did communicate that the city of West Sacramento was interested in ensuring that the residents of our current program would hopefully transition to the new permanent supportive housing project that we have that's set to open in September 21, if it in fact does open on schedule. But other jurisdictions didn't know, and there was a request to go back to their own councils and kind of just check in to see if in fact their agencies would want to continue their programs forth. However, we did get an update at the Board of Supervisors meeting. There was an agreement. They voted unanimously to approve a recommendation to work with cities to obtain a 50-50 cost sharing agreement for all program costs past June 2021. And for cities that are willing to financially participate, work collaboratively to identify an appropriate end date, ideally corresponding with, like, say, for example, our permanent supportive housing or other shelter options if it's another jurisdiction, but in no case anytime later than December 2021. And for cities not willing to financially participate, the programs for them will end on June 30th. And they are going to continue evaluating options for cost savings and partner with homeless jurisdictions on longer-term homeless and housing options. Right now, West Sacramento has approximately 38 currently housed with Project Room Key. This is not to be confused with Home Key, which we have at the roadway currently, but we do have 2 other motels that are being used for this purpose. So I think I did consult with our city manager, and he said that he is having a discussion with our chief administrative officer as well as other city managers in Yolo County, and they may bring it to us as a standalone item before the June 21st meeting if we want to talk about whether or not we want to approve as a body our local share. If we decide we want to continue this and pay the 50%, and if so, we could decide to extend it until our permanent supportive housing development is open for business. And if that does come through, we could expect a potential proposal for Measure E one-time funds, which could then be hopefully reimbursed by ARP. And the other meeting I attended was the May 12th Regional Sanitation District meeting. We did approve the final budgets for 2021 and 22, and the other item of business that was relevant to West Sacramento is that we finally approved the first amendment to our wastewater operating agreement, and that would be between Regional San and the city of West Sacramento. As we talked about before, we have always been, we entered this agreement well after other agencies had been involved. And so I guess practically we were just an addendum to what had already been agreed. And what we do is we bill our residents for Regional San and collect the fees for them and turn it over. However, we've always bore the cost of people who, for example, rates that weren't paid, or like even the cost of administration when it comes to billing. And now luckily we will get reimbursed under the new cost sharing agreement. So I'm really happy about that. I served on the subcommittee with Oscar Villegas on this, and it's a really good step for us. Because we had the chance to turn it over to them, but since we already have it going, it'll be nice to at least ameliorate some of the loss that we were incurring. And that is it for my report. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Orozco. That was an important report. Councilmember Alcala.
Thank you, Mayor. On May 12th, I attended the Yolo Solano Air Quality Management District meeting. The board approved the following items. There were 5: the long-range planning calendar, indemnification schedule, First Northern Bank quarterly report, an agreement with the Sacramento Metro Air Quality Management District for 2022 through 2024, spare the air seasons, and an agreement with the Sonoma Tech to provide PM 2.5 forecasting for the 2021 through 2024. Don't like tonight's season. I didn't know what a PM 2.5 was, and I found out that it was a pollution forecasting model, and it gives you pollution data at different times. So that was something I didn't know, and I don't think a lot of people knew. That's why I wanted to also share that. Also, we accepted an audit of the Yolo Solano Air Quality Management District fiscal year 2019 through 2020. Passed resolution 2101, which was authorizing APCO to accept fiscal year 2020 and 2021 state reserve funding. APCO was another acronym I wasn't familiar with, and that's an air pollution control officer. And then there were new assignments for the Solano Clean Air Funds Committee that were approved. There were also informational reports. One was the 2020 through 2021 PM2 season. There was the farm funding, and that stands for Funding Agricultural Replacement Measure for Emissions Reductions Goal Program. And there was the Agricultural Pump Engine 101, which explains how the district regulates agricultural pumps. And finally, there was a report on the California Air Resources Board reporting regulations. They are actually changing. They are going to be requiring more facilities to report data beginning in 2025. And this is part of the emissions inventory criteria and guidelines requirement that was part of AB 2588 and the district rule 4.9. So currently there's no funding, and they are projecting the cost statewide to all air districts to be about up to 5.3 million and up, I should say. And that is the end of my report.
Thank you, Councilmember Alcala. Mayor Pro Tem Ledesma.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Yeah, two meetings to report on. First on May 10th, Monday to May 10th, it was a meeting of the Yolo County Transportation District Board of Directors, and happy to report a familiar face leading that meeting for the first time, Marty Tuttle, former city manager, now acting as a management consultant and leading the agency as we go through an interim period, interim director period. But nice to see Marty's face on my Zoom screen once again. But we did have a pretty good agenda. A couple of things to take note of. We did receive a draft budget. And part of our discussion around that budget was the probably changing nature of it. We will need to address some funding issues coming as a result of the CARES Act and the ridership issues. As many know, I've been reporting into this council for the last year or two since the pandemic. And before that, sort of the ridership issues are continuing to be a problem. But Marty has started to work on the budget, and the staff is starting to address some of the key issues, particularly around revenue loss that are there. So we had our first look at that under Marty's watch. We also got an update to talk a bit about the recruitment of a new executive director. Marty Tuttle's role is as a management consultant, leading the agency as well as with acting executive director that's been on the staff. But the intent is to start a process of recruiting a full-time executive director for the agency soon. So we got an update on that. We did get I had a discussion led by Marty about the mission of YCTD. This is of importance to us and this council, as we have ventured into sort of the transit mobility business, as we have looked at the mobility action plan. We have VIA and participate in the ride share and scooter share programs. But the board unanimously kind of moved forward on a mission, or at least gave direction to Marty and the staff. Now, YCTD should be looking more broadly at the county's transit needs and looking at other ways to fulfill transit. I think that was a big goal. It's a big goal that the YCTD already has the authority to do. He provided the original legislation that was brought forward that instituted, established the district, and that's sort of our goal. And Marty wants the board to clearly, who is interested in this and give their full support to make sure that the district is more involved in some of the modes and mobility issues that we've been trying to address as a city and other cities have in Yolo County. So it was welcome news by the other members of the board. I think some of the board members will admit we're a bit ahead, while Davis has much more active bike and bus ridership. Our move towards VIA and the sharing system have again put us up front. So again, this is a new direction for YCTD, and happy to report out that the board is unanimously on board and moving forward in that direction. So that was a really good discussion. And in that vein, we had another presentation, this one led by SACOG CEO James Corliss and his team, who gave a presentation on the Sacramento Regional Parks and Trail system and that process. SACOG, I know Mayor Guerrero's seen this because she's on the SACOG board, but there's been a lot of feedback from the community, the greater region, about how to SACOG could better lead the way on active trails, bike routes, and others that help facilitate better mobility options. And so they have been getting a lot of feedback from the region, including West Sacramento, about where we can go. And there was a lot of discussion about, in Yolo County, particularly West Sacramento, about access areas and can better facilitate mobility throughout our community. So again, something probably the YCTD would be more involved in helping to lead that discussion for the county. And I think that was it. We had a closed session, but nothing to report out on there. So also allow me to flip to it. This past Monday, the 17th, was a meeting of the Yolo Habitat Conservancy. There are a few items which we approved. One is that board had to approve the 21-22 budget and budget resolution. So again, we got a look at the budget, and it's been a while since I looked at a budget at the Yolo Habitat Conservancy, but things are going very well. And it's a startup district, and we're starting to see revenues flow in. And we are keeping costs contained because of the arrangement on leadership we have there. So good news on that. We also approved a contract amendment for a couple of our contractors that are important to us as we, that board and the staff review easements and other areas that monitoring the conservation lands that we have. And then we also approved an easement in the Woodland Reef Swanson Hawk Conservation Area. And that's a very good move. That's the work we're supposed to be doing in terms of starting to evaluate lands for habitat and it's in being able to make sure we have the right monitoring system going forward. So again, it's pretty robust conversation. There was also an update to we call the stewardship donation policy, which is in short a way for to prepay, so to say, your fees as you're getting evaluated for the permits, as a way to make sure they're covering costs. So again, if staff is engaged, we want to make sure we have a deposit in place. So this is a way to further that as landowners are getting active and they start to ask staff to evaluate sites. We want to make sure we had a process for that. So anyway, that's all I have to report for tonight.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Ledesma. Very good updates from all of you. Today, I participated in a League of Cities Advocacy Day, and we had met with the Assembly Member McCarty's staff together with Sacramento and our partners for the region. And we discussed what our priorities are, which included asking for the legislature to commit $10 billion in the state budget to help cities recover from the pandemic. And out of the $10 billion, we're asking for $2 billion of direct and flexible aid from the state to the cities to address local budget gaps, and $5 billion for homelessness and housing solutions. This includes expanding on Project Home Key and the HEAP and the HAP programs, and also low-income housing tax credit program, infill infrastructure grant program. As you'll see, we have a proposal ahead of us. Infill is a challenge And so we need additional funding for that. And $3 billion for broadband infrastructure, and $225 million to help fund mandates to divert organic waste from landfills. And we have a budget proposal or a budget request in our package today. If we had an opportunity to thank the Assembly member staff for authoring AB 921, which is our flood protection bill that's currently up in Assembly Appropriations Committee, and bills will be taken up on tomorrow, so we'll know whether it continues, keeping our fingers crossed it does. And it was overall a very good meeting, very positively well received. The outcome is you want to be able to convince the member that these are priorities that are important, and the staff were really cognizant of what is going on in West Sacramento and our specific concerns, and even looking at a model program such as the one that West Sac PD, where if there is a use of force incident, that we have another agency do the investigation. And so they were looking at our model in the past and were available to provide additional input. As you know, these are challenging issues that are brought up, and models are looked at in the legislature. In addition to that, I participated in the U.S. Conference of Mayors, reimagining the police system that Greg Fisher, the mayor of Louisville, the conference president, he convened a summit so the mayors can discuss ways for cities to use the whole of local and federal government and all the other community resources to make cities more just, equitable, and safe by reimagining public safety, specifically to have more community-centered production of public safety, reduce gun violence, and increase police community legitimacy. And that is something I think we're moving ahead in and progressing very well in West Sacramento. But I think there are definitely ways to improve. And so going to continue to, take a look at some of the models in other jurisdictions and see what we can do to improve on that, working with our chief. And Yash, our Madam Clerk, has distributed to all of you. The Sacramento Valley Division is going to convene a meeting on Friday, May 28th from 12 to 2 p.m. And in that, presentations will be offered related to broadband infrastructure. Assemblymember Aguiar Curry has secured about $2 billion in funding statewide. And so she's been very successful. We have been supportive of her legislation. And so it is a major achievement that she succeeded that to address, broadband gaps. And also will receive an American Recovery Plan federal transportation infrastructure funding update by the National League of Cities. And so welcome for your participation. You can register to sign up if you would like to hear more about what is going on in those updates. So with that, I will conclude my update, and next will be our consent items. I understand that we have 2 items before I move into that we'll be removing from our agenda. That is item number 4, and on our agenda, regular agenda, is item number 12. So I just wanted, yes.
I wanted to pull number 6.
Okay. Okay, so I just wanted to just clarify that we are removing 2 items before we move forward, just so you're aware. And that way we don't have to ask for those items. So Councilmember Alcala wants to pull item number 6, and any other items to pull?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I'd like to pull item 10 and ask that actually, if possible, we could read that first for the rest of the, thank you.
Yes, I agree. Thank you. And I will pull item number 2, 5, and that's it. And we will take up item number 10. We'll move the arrangement so that we take up item number 10 first. Go ahead, Mayor Pro Tem Ledesma.
Well, Madam Mayor, thank you. I really want to thank the city staff and most of all this council for putting this item once again onto the agenda. I think we'll go ahead and vote for it along with everything else. And Madam Mayor, for a point of clarification, would you like me to go ahead and read the proclamation into the record?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay. So I'll go ahead and read that first, and then I'll have a few comments if that's okay.
That'll be great.
Okay, so the proclamation as proposed from the West Sacramento City Council declaring May 2021 as Mental Health Awareness Month. Whereas mental health is essential to everyone's overall health and well-being, and whereas an estimated 20% of the United States population have experience with mental illness. Whereas in California, suicide is the second leading cause of death for ages 25 to 34, and the third leading cause of death for youth ages 10 to 24. And whereas in 2020, 621 West Sacramento residents ages 3 to 93 engaged in mental health services with the Yolo County Health and Human Services Agency, and over 2,600 mental health services were provided. Whereas during the COVID-19 pandemic, additional stress and social isolation have contributed to an increase in mental health awareness and a need to make everyone feel comfortable in seeking help and support to manage these times. And whereas engaging in prevention, early identification, and early intervention are as effective ways to reduce the burden of mental illness as they are to reduce the burden of other chronic conditions. Whereas several agencies and community organizations are collaborating in their efforts to address mental health concerns, including the Yolo County Local Mental Health Board and the Yolo County Health and Human Services Agency Wellness Centers in West Sacramento, Woodland, and Davis. And whereas Mental Health Month is supported by year-long efforts of the National Alliance of Mental Health, NAMI, and the Yolo chapter to raise awareness of mental health issues and services. And whereas providing community-based mental health services can families and educate citizens of West Sacramento and Yolo County about treatments and programs available, as well as assisting to reduce the stigma associated with mental health. Now, therefore, be it hereby proclaimed by the West Sacramento City Council that the month of May 2021 be recognized as Mental Health Awareness Month. So thank you to staff and to the mayor for providing this proclamation. And thank you, Mayor, for personally inviting my daughter and her family to be a part of this and having Elena do the pledge, lead us this afternoon on the pledge. As many of you are aware, and those in the public, maybe, Elena, they know her passion for this issue, her passion for bringing awareness to mental health, as she has very publicly battled her own mental health issues and continues to try to bring awareness to those and has shared her experience with this council and previous councils and with friends in the community. This is an important issue for a lot of reasons read in that proclamation, but mostly because it's about individual family struggles and individual struggles and family struggles. Some of us are blessed with the resources we need to get the help we need, and some of us aren't. And I want to take a moment to thank those that in our community who help support them. I named a couple in the community who have who are in our community helping every day bring awareness to the issue and providing the services we need, including the NAMI, who we mentioned earlier, as well as the county. And I know the leadership of Supervisor Villegas has been trying to bring services more close to West Sacramento for the past few years since this has been an issue. But most importantly, I want to thank the city. I said this council and the previous councils for the support of this. This has been a priority on our priority board in recent years as we've gone through this as a family. And we have made great strides as a city as bringing more awareness to it. Services are listed on our website at a minimum, but we go further than that. We participate in NAMI, we participate in making sure, I know our advocates on the county, city 2x2 advocate for these services all the time. And we are all personally invested in this endeavor. And departments are starting to pay more attention to it. Most notably our police department, who has made critical decisions along with us about providing new roles in the police department to help address calls that call for mental health situations. So again, that's a great stride that we have made in this community. And I'm really proud of all those providers. We mentioned them earlier. And I want to also mention the private providers, and too many to name. Many of them are friends that have businesses, but their main goal here is to support and care for those in our community. This is an important proclamation, important month. an important topic. And I just really want to thank all those that serve our community just to raise awareness of this and support those in our community who need the help, including those families and support systems. They need the help too. I say that with a great deal of pride as the other member of my family who also happens to be a member of the Yolo County Health Board, Maria Simas, the better half of me, is on the phone, is on the line today as well. I think we have Carlene Janowski, is that right? Is she on? I don't see her. Is she on the?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, there you are. Thank you. So I want to thank both of you for the work you do to support our community. And again, thank you, Mayor, for the invitation to take this up.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Ledesma. Just wanted to ask if Maria Simas or Carlene would like to say anything.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor Guerrero and council members, Chris Ledesma, Karina Orozco, and Akala. We appreciate the partnership that the city has given to the local mental health board. My fellow board folks with me are Alicia Gutierrez and Rachel Warren. We represent District 1. It's a really important recognition for mental health this month. There are so many folks in need in our community, and our goal really is to make sure that we bring the services available to them through the county and partner with the cities and with the residents of West Sacramento. Our next meeting is on Monday evening. We really want to encourage folks to participate. Similar to the city, our meetings are via Zoom. If you go onto the county website, you're able to link on there and provide public comment, which is so important during these times to really make sure the resources are reaching your loved ones and your friends and family members. So thank you so much for this opportunity to be here today, and we look forward to continuing to partner with the city to find ways to bring resources to our residents.
Thank you so much, Maria, for your service to our community. Greatly appreciate it.
Hi, thank you, Mayor Guerrero, council members. Carlene Jakowski, I'm the branch director for the Child, Youth, and Family branch of the Yolo County Health and Human Services Agency. It is a real honor to be here tonight and to accept the proclamation for Mental Health Awareness Month. The mental health and well-being of our community is so important, and right now it is a critical priority. I want to just take an opportunity to briefly highlight some of the local prevalence of mental health challenges for children and youth in our community, and just to really highlight the importance of prevention and early intervention. When compared to California, Yolo County has higher rates of hospitalization for mental health issues for youth ages 6 to 19 and higher rates of youth hospitalization due to self-inflicted injuries. Early identification and treatment can make a world of difference in the progression of mental illness. During the Local Mental Health Services Act community stakeholder process, the need to invest in prevention and early intervention services was really clear. Youth described feeling helpless, living with the challenges that increase their own risk for mental health struggles. Additionally, the school system was frequently identified as an optimal place for engagement and intervention. It was with this community feedback in mind that the Health and Human Services Agency, in partnership with our local school districts, including Washington Unified, developed the K-12 School Partnerships Project that is scheduled for implementation in the upcoming school year. This project leverages Mental Health Services Act funding, county mental health funding, and grant funding, and intends to transform and expand the mental health prevention and early intervention services available on school campuses in West Sacramento and throughout Yolo County. The vision is that all school-aged youth will be able to access mental health services in a safe, comfortable environment through an improved school-based delivery system. The mission is to create a complete continuum of services that includes resources for prevention, early intervention, and treatment for children and youth and the families who care for them. The COVID-19 pandemic has taken a tremendous toll on our community and has disproportionately impacted communities of color who were already experiencing significantly disparate health outcomes. Throughout the pandemic, children and youth and adults and families have faced challenges that are increasingly stressful, overwhelming, and cause strong emotions. Public health actions like social distancing have been necessary to reduce the spread of COVID-19, but they have also increased social isolation, loneliness, depression, stress, and anxiety. Job loss, economic challenges, and food insecurity only exacerbate these challenges for our community. Despite the increased impacts to mental health and well-being, Yolo County Health and Human Services concurrently saw a decline in requests for access to mental health services for children and youth during the pandemic, and adults. We can and should anticipate that the extensive impacts to mental health and well-being will be felt in our community for many years to come. So as we begin our collective recovery from the pandemic and its impacts, it is time now to expand our outreach in the community, to increase awareness and knowledge about mental health challenges, to reduce the stigma associated with seeking help, expand access to services, and respond to all of these needs in a trauma-informed and culturally responsive manner. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak to the council tonight and for your commitment to supporting the wellness of children, youth, and adults in our community. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, and with that, Mayor Pro Tem Ledesma, I think we're done. Okay, thank you. Now we'll move on to item number 2. And just want to say thank you very much to, to both Maria Simas and Ms. Chakowski. I just really appreciate all the hard work. It's, in my experience, been a shortage of funding and, even in the mental health insurance industry, just the lack of understanding for providing mental health services. And it's always been a fight to treat mental health with parity with, physical health. So, you've been doing a lot of hard work to break ground and increase access to mental health services. So thank you very much. Now we'll move on to item number 2. I believe there's a question in public comment, which I don't think is going to be spoken here, but I do have a question regarding the use of Measure E money and smart cities. Can you please provide a little background as to Measure E, smart cities, and why it's applicable to this expenditure that is being requested here?
Mayor, I think that's probably a question that I can best address, and I may ask our Deputy City Manager, John Robinson, to help me out here. But basically, it is tied to the use of the conference space and the proposed build out of this office space. There's a portion of the property, I believe it's about 800 or so square feet, that we're proposing to build out as not just a conference space, but a unique conference space that we don't really have in terms of what's available at City Hall right now, that would be available not just for staff, but also for community events, would have a higher level of technology than most of our spaces. And the thought is that by doing so, it's sort of an innovation center. It would allow us to host events that speak to the purpose of that part of Measure E with the Smart City Readiness funding. And that's the nexus for that portion. And it's proportionately tied to the size of that part of the build out of that space. And I don't know if John has anything to add, or I know he helped with the Measure E justification on that.
Nope. Okay.
We'll take that as a no. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Thank you for that explanation. And as part of the comment, it included maybe reevaluating the study of the use of Measure E for smart cities. If that's, we can talk about that a little more and just get a little more background from you, from our city manager. And now item number 5.
Mayor, may I ask a question?
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
I can pull this, but I am curious. So the rent would be $1 a year. What is the common area charge per year?
The common area charge, I'm not positive about that. Perhaps, I think if anyone knows on this meeting, it may be our Economic Development Director, Katie Jacobson. That may still be being negotiated, but it's based on, generally that's based on our share of the common area maintenance. And so the budget for the project would have an amount, and they would assign that amount based on our square footage. I don't know if Katie has the exact cost at her fingertips.
Just reviewing this, I was also curious what the development fee amount is and what the impact fee amount would be as well. So we could get those.
The amount that we're paying.
Right.
Okay, that may be better addressed by Jeremy, but why don't we start with the CAM charges, see if Katie has an answer there.
I don't have the specific CAM charges, but we had scrutinized them very carefully, went back and forth with the property owner several times. I can certainly provide those to you later on tonight. I'll pull them. But there was a negotiated process and we agreed and scrubbed what the city's share of CAM costs would be for this facility.
And while Jeremy is coming on, I will just kind of reiterate that the business terms of this project were very much in our favor from the original negotiation of the Affordable Housing Agreement. We had the look ahead to two things, not wanting to have a vacant retail space, which often happens in affordable housing developments that are mixed use just because the market isn't quite there. But also we knew that we were going to have the need for future city hall space. And I think the pandemic coming out of that has really highlighted that need with needing more space for employees, both as the city grows, but also to adapt to the post-COVID environment. So I'm hoping Jeremy is with us and maybe can address the questions about what our portion of fees would be. So we're essentially paying ourselves in a way, except it's money that is coming from one source and then going to our impact fee funds. So Jeremy, do you know that information offhand?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you guys hear me okay? I don't have the best reception right now.
Go ahead.
Okay. So can I get a little clarification on the question? Was it in relation to impact fees?
I'm sorry. Yes, there were actually three. What is the common area charge per year? Second one, what is the development fee amount? And what is the impact fee amount? There are three.
Yeah, Katie has the most info on the first one, as she mentioned. She had the most involvement with that, so I'll have to rely on her on that. I believe the impact fees and the other development fees you referenced were, I believe those were paid or covered in the original build out, because this is a tenant improvement. I believe that was all paid with the original project, if I'm not mistaken. The only fees that we would be responsible for that I'm aware of in regards to the construction would be the building permit fees and the other fees that I have listed in the construction estimate.
Yeah, that's correct. Thanks for that clarification, Jeremy. So the permitting line item that you see in the budget is the building permit costs, and that's typically based on the valuation of the build out. So in that case, it's about $40,000. And like Katie said, we'll do our best to get you the exact information on the CAM charge. I can follow up with an email to the council if that's helpful.
Great, thank you.
Okay. I actually pulled item 5, but it was not exactly related. My question is not exactly related to the item before us. So I'm just gonna, there is a public comment related to that, but it's not quite related to parking meters. The questions are around this issue, but not specific to the parking meter discussion here. But I do understand the background for a need for parking meters, and been there myself trying to find parking in the area, and sometimes it's really hard to find a meter to be able to track down the number so that you can use it via your cell phone. Moving on to item number 6, Councilmember Alcala.
As I went through this, I had some questions to ask about the construction of help me understand, the construction of luxury apartments. And this is going to be right there facing the river. It's a rather small space, but how is it that they are getting these fees? I mean, we have 55 units being built at a cost of $6,560, which would give us $360,800 that the owners of this luxury complex should be building us, because it's being built in an infill area. Is that correct? But then they're going to get 200 credit of 288,640. So that only leaves our city with 62,160. Could you explain how that happens?
Certainly. So the fee, once you account for the urban infill area incentive that they would have to pay, would be approximately 72,000. But in the urban infill area, we have a urban infill area incentive that allows or promotes large urban infill high density development. And that's following the recommendations of the Washington Realized document, was to visit our Housing Trust Fund program and look into the higher costs that urban infill development typically has compared to other areas of the city. So the urban infill area incentive provides discounts for highly dense projects. As you noted, the project is going to be built on just over half an acre site. So when you consider the 55 units on about a half an acre site, that's approximately 100 dwelling units per acre. The Housing Trust Fund program allows for an 80% discount in the waterfront zone for projects that meet 100% dwelling units to the acres. So it's really a reflection of the density of the project, the fact that it's a fairly dense project in a very small area. And again, the costs that are associated with that type of development, and making sure that we are acknowledging the fact that it's very expensive to build in urban infill areas in the waterfront zones. And again, consistent with the recommendations in Washington Realized.
If I could. Well, I'm sorry, go ahead, Aaron.
No, please. I was just going to expand on Raul's comments.
I guess my big concern is, that's prime real estate there. It's overlooking the river. I'd love to have a house there. I have a nice house. No complaints. I have a great house. But I think anyone would love to build in that area. And these are going to be luxury, units. They're not affordable housing units. So I guess I just don't understand if they're going to be making lots of money off these luxury units. Do you know what the cost per unit would be once they build these? Because they did say they were luxury units.
Yeah, we don't have the information from the developer on what they're selling for, but it's granted that they're going to be some of the highest price per square foot units in the city. So what I was going to add,
why are we giving the back to 288,640? I mean, why can't we use that for our affordable housing? I mean, to me, that would seem,
right, and that's kind of what I wanted to expand on. So I certainly understand the appearance of, well, this is a really high price development that will net a lot of revenue to that developer. So should they be able to have the same discount that other infill projects get? And that really speaks to the purpose of this program. While it is one of the highest price developments in terms of the revenue that will be received for the price of the unit, it's also one of the most expensive projects ever built in West Sacramento. And a lot of that is tied to just the pure cost of construction. It's also tied to our fees, our costs, the cost of land. And so to Raul's point, in explaining why we have this program, it's really to recognize that these higher cost developments that are desirable infill, efficient use of land, yes, they're luxury units, but it's everything that we're trying to do with the precious space that we have in these infill environments. We came up with this program as a way to mitigate those higher costs while still making sure that those developments pay a fair share towards affordable housing. Now, it's not going to be the same as it would have been for a single family home in Southport, but those costs are relative. And so in this case, this project will pay its share based on that incentive. That money will go to have us make a loan to the West Gateway Place 2 project, which will be able to move ahead probably at a faster pace than this project. Now, I can understand people that may, the point you're making about the policy on appearance, it may look like that seems like a very generous incentive. But again, it's about the cost of the development. It's also about competitiveness. This same program does not exist across the river. They had a similar program before. My understanding is they rescinded it for the downtown area. And so this project, in terms of its competition with the local market, is already on a lower competitive basis. And so this program exists to both still provide some funding for affordable housing, but also to allow projects like this to move forward in the riverfront area. So
I understand what you're saying, Aaron, and normally it would be okay, but when I see luxury, and I know that they're going to be making lots of money, these developers, I can't understand why they can't give our city for our affordable housing the 288, 640. For them, it's going to be a drop in the bucket. So I'm not thinking it's a good deal. I don't think we negotiated, well in this. I really don't. And so, I know what you're saying about the cost and stuff, but I can tell you, I don't agree.
Yeah, so these aren't negotiated agreements. These are based on a program that was set up multiple years ago for exactly this purpose, to enable high density riverfront development to go forward without all the obstacles that are already in place, including fees, land costs, construction costs, and also the reality that we do have an inclusionary housing ordinance. It's another cost that they have to bear. I think what would be helpful, and this is something that I've spoken to you about in the past, I know, is to get more of a look into the actual financials on these projects, because while you're right, they are going to take in a lot of money because of the cost of the units, the cost to build them. The margins are not what you'd expect in terms of profit margins to the developer. They have this project out to bid right now, and we're just hoping that it comes in at a level where it can be feasibly built. So I know that's a easy perception just based on the cost of the units, but there is a lot to the story of building infill housing that isn't just about the cost of the unit to the purchaser, but the cost to build it for the developer. So I don't expect that to sway the opinion on how the program looks, but those are the facts of how we got here with the policy. So
yeah, I understand what you're saying, but for me, it's it just, we're doing a great job in affordable housing. You guys have done a great job, and it just bothers me to know that this money, this 288, could be going to our affordable housing. And I know you're saying it's the regulations that are there and they're entitled to it. But I think in a good faith effort, they should release that money, for our affordable housing program. And just my opinion on that. And I think a lot of people some of the people I've spoken with feel that way as well. Okay, thank you. You answered questions I have. By the way, I think we should have left that area maybe, for a park or something, because that is prime real estate here in West Sac. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Ocala. And I did want to add a little bit regarding housing. It's an area I work on, housing and homelessness. And one of the challenges that's driving homelessness numbers high is a combination of things, is lack of affordable housing and rental housing. But the supply of housing in general is pretty bad. And fortunately, we are looking at a legislative, state budget proposals. And I think with the Biden administration, we're looking at federal funding to increase the supply of housing. And we're producing a housing element, which was going to be amended slightly to be, it's going to be revised and returning back to us. That was item number 12. And item number 12 will be able to speak to some of the questions that came up even under public comment on the location of building, making sure that we have affordable housing in our city and accessible locations. And I do recall an area in the, behind the Nugget where there was a home for sale and it had specific criteria for who could qualify for that home. And it was very, much a requirement that you could not sell the home to anybody else. You'd have to be able to make sure that if anybody purchased it, they met those requirements. So it was dedicated for people with low income, and I'm talking about really low income. Nowadays, without being able to increase, especially now with the pandemic, people are not being able to afford rent. So we will be having more difficulties and taking a look at options to address that in the state budget and the federal budget as well. But going back to the reason we have around allowing housing to be built, I think we're ahead in other compared to other jurisdictions in building more housing, and building more housing does help address. It's a solution to affordable housing, in that you have more supply being built. But I do understand the point of being able to. This is the Housing Trust Fund, and the inclusionary housing payment is set. It's not something that could be negotiated, as Aaron, and I've been familiar with this. I was also in the same boat early on, Councilmember Alcala, with the concerns raised, and I had a chance to really understand better, as an incentive to build here in West Sacramento. It really is not something that is other cities. I've learned other cities do not have it. We do have in this city inclusionary housing, and we've been ahead of other cities who didn't even adopt that. So I'm, for that, I'm proud for the fact that we did develop that component. And, now, who's our former insurance commissioner, Dave Jones, also fought to have established affordable housing here in West Sacramento. So that's why that's why these are elements of what he's produced here to expand, making sure that we have affordable housing. And so these are some of the policies that were set in place. And so I appreciate that, that these are policies that help increase affordable housing. Councilmember Ledesma. Mayor Pro Tem Ledesma, go ahead. You're muted.
Thank you. No, thank you. Actually, just reiterated something you said was something else. Reiterate the fact that our approach to affordable housing the last 10 years, particularly in this area of town, has been pretty robust. And I appreciate you bring that up, because we do have projects. We led the Bridge District with the affordable housing project, and so we have made great strides. And it is important, to your point, where I think having housing and dense housing in this area is really critically important, and not just for housing's sake. Dense housing also helps us on things like climate change and all the areas where we are counting on kind of the transit-oriented housing around this area to be dense. I mean, just across the street from the Ziggurat, they're already breaking ground on a project we approved, the KIND project, which is affordable housing and without a subsidy. So again, these are the opportunities, because we are activating these areas. This policy was in place to spur building in this area. That's the area. We want it active. And then as we get more active, that kind of success will breed more investment into those types of projects. Oh, to your point, Mayor, thank you for making it. We've done a really good job, I think, already. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Ledesma. And with that, I think there are no other requests to speak on any other item. I'll accept a motion after removing item 4 to approve the consent agenda. Oh, and did you, Councilmember College, do you want me to remove item number 6 so you can vote separately? Okay, we'll also remove item number 6, and that'll be there'll be a separate vote for that, and I'll accept a motion.
I'll move. So this is just on the consent.
On the consent, removing item 4 and 6. Yes.
Yeah, I'll move the recommended action.
A second.
Okay. Thank you. Councilmember Alcala, who seconded? Sorry, who was it? Oh, Councilmember Alcala. Okay, and Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Hey, Mayor. Councilmember Alcala.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Ledesma.
Aye.
Councilmember Orozco.
Aye.
Mayor Guerrero.
Aye. All right, motion is approved. And next we will take up, I think our next item is, let's see, really quick here. Our timeset item number 13.
Are we taking on item 6?
Oh, sorry. Yes, item number 6. Sorry. Thank you for reminding me. Item number 6. I'll accept a motion to approve.
Thank you. I will move approval of the recommended action on item 6.
Okay, second.
Thank you, Councilmember Roscoe. Okay, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Alcala.
No.
Councilmember Orozco. Aye. Pro Tem Ledesma.
Aye.
And Mayor Guerrero.
Aye. Okay. Item number 6 is approved, and item 4 is taken up next week. All right. So we will now move to our time set agenda, item number 13 under the city manager, which is consideration of the first reading of ordinance 21-6, amending chapter 18.20.040 of the City of West Sacramento Municipal Code relating to the floodplain management. And I think it's who's going to be presenting on this item?
I will. Brian Brown from our Flood Protection Division should be on the screen. Thank you. Okay,
Mr. Brown, please proceed.
Yeah, Brian Brown, Senior Engineer, West Safeca. Want to introduce this ordinance to you guys and recommend that the City Council waive the first reading and read by title and number only ordinance 21-6, amending chapter 18.20.40 of the City of West Sacramento Municipal Code related to floodplain management, and inform the public that the second reading and adoption of the ordinance is tentatively scheduled for June 2nd, 2021. And the details regarding this ordinance is that we are modifying the ordinance Part B to coincide with Section A. Section A states that manufacturer's home shall be elevated at least 1 foot above the base flood elevation and be securely anchored, while Section B states or when mentioning the 1 foot above base flood elevation and anchoring. So in reviewing the municipal code, we found this inconsistency and we wanted to change Section B to be consistent with Section A. And this also helps out with the city's community rating system standards for the discount on flood insurance.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Are there any questions among our council members? No questions? Okay, we'll open this item up for public comment. Any requests to speak? Madam Clerk?
There are no speakers, Mayor.
Okay, we'll close the public comment, bring it back to council. Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Mr. Brown, for everything you've done on this. I hope our everybody appreciates the work that you have done so that we can get our flood insurance taken care of. I just paid mine.
Same here.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council.
Thank you, Brian. With that, Madam Mayor, I'll move the recommended action.
Okay, thank you. And Councilmember Alcala seconds, and Madam Clerk, or sorry, Councilmember Orozco seconds. Sorry, everybody's mics go off and I can't tell us. Okay, thank you. And Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Let's start with Councilmember Orozco.
Aye.
Councilmember Alcala.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Ledesma.
Aye.
And Mayor Guerrero.
Aye. Okay, next we will move to item 14 under Finance and Technology as consideration of our 2021-2022 and fiscal year 2022-2023 operations and maintenance and capital improvement program budget update. It's our workshop, and the director, Roberta Raper, will provide an overview of today's workshop. Go ahead, Roberta, it's all yours.
All right, thank you, Madam Mayor. First, I just want to make a comment about there's a lot of information in the budget packet. I understand it's a very large budget packet. It is large. Many of the pages included are in the attachments are the detailed pages provided for reference. And so I don't expect you to have read every page, although I know many of you have gotten a long way through it. And this presentation is intended to provide a summary overview of the budget requests and provide time for questions and discussions on the individual items and overall policy directions as we move into the recovery phase of the pandemic. So there's a lot of information for you, I know, to digest. There's a lot of information for me to try and relay. And so please forgive me if I stumble through the presentation, but we will get through this together. So, all right. I'm assuming I'm sharing my screen. I'm assuming you can see my slides. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so quick agenda for tonight. We are going to, I'll provide a little bit of background on the process. And then while this section was sort of later in the written report, I want to start out tonight talking about the pandemic and the impacts that it's had on our fiscal situation and also the American Rescue Plan funds that we will be receiving from the federal government shortly. We'll be looking at our O&M, operation and maintenance budget assumptions. That's sort of the status quo budget. along with all of the supplemental requests, which come in the form of decision packages and capital projects. We also have a quick update on the general fund long-term model. As you know, when we consider budget adjustments that impact the general fund, we always take it beyond the 2-year budget and look at a longer-term model just to make sure that those requests are going to be sustainable long-term. We'll also provide a little bit more information on the tax measure funds. There's an entire section in your packet dedicated to the tax measure funds and those requests, and provides the scorecard so you can see how they fit within the eligible criteria categories and the annual targets for funding. And then I've got a summary of the main policy issues and things that we would that we're requesting feedback from you on. So we will go ahead and move through that. So for a little bit of background, the city adopts a 2-year budget in odd numbered years. So we're in 2021. This is luckily for us the year. And no funds are able to be spent without council approved appropriations. So a budget is required this year to be adopted before July 1st. There is no action requested tonight. This is a workshop to discuss the various budget requests and policy issues, and for council to provide feedback to staff so that we can incorporate that into the final proposed budget, which is scheduled to come back to you for consideration on June 16th. And so here we are, May 19th. I know there's one more meeting between now and June 16th, given the large volume of information to talk about tonight. If we need to, there's always the opportunity to come back again to continue discussions or provide updates on things that council would like to see more information on at the next meeting. So let's see. Going between 2 screens is a little hard. This first screen is really focused on the pandemic impacts. So the stay-at-home orders were effective mid-March 2020, so a little over a year ago, which required businesses to either close temporarily or change the way they do business to accommodate social distancing requirements and other requirements in the public health orders. At the time, the orders were expected to flatten the curve of new infections, and the general expectation was that it would be lifted soon after and we would return to a state of normalcy quite quickly. I know I was in front of you just over a year ago, May 13th last year, providing an update on the pandemic. And we were hoping at that time that, by the end of June or early into July, we'd be opening back up and getting back to normal. But now we're 14 months into it. Vaccines widely available. The rate of new infections is much lower now than it was a year ago or even 6 months ago. However, the general revenue sources of the city have been hit hard by the pandemic. Thanks to this council and previous council's decisions on how the city was built, the different development, and setting aside funds to protect the city in times like this, we've actually fared a lot better than a lot of other cities, especially because we don't rely heavily on tourism, retail sales, and restaurants as a lot of other areas. And so as such, we have not had to make significant cuts or implement layoffs. That being said, the general fund is projected to lose over $25 million in general revenues between the start of the pandemic last year and the end of the next fiscal year. And that number is based on projected revenues compared to what revenues would have been, utilizing a 3-year average for annual increases in the general fund for 3 fiscal years prior to the pandemic, before it began. So we're looking at fiscal year 16-17, 17-18, and 18-19. The average annual revenue growth for those 3 years was 8.1%. And so if we apply that same annual growth factor for last fiscal year, this year, and next year, the revenue loss is estimated at about $25.3 million in the general fund only. To respond to this, the City Council approved temporary reductions to the O&M budgets. We held non-essential positions vacant, and we delayed several general fund projects that were already approved by Council, helping to mitigate some of the lost revenues over the past several months and save one-time fund balance to be available to balance the budget over the next few years until revenues recover and return to pre-pandemic levels. Additionally, the city's incurred approximately $8 million in pandemic-related expenses, not including the shifting of full-time staff from their regular jobs to focusing on the pandemic and its impacts. And those expenses are expected to be funded by reimbursements from FEMA, FEMA, the coronavirus relief funds, the CARES Act funds, and funding received from other agencies related to Project Home Key, along with $100,000 in general fund appropriations that were approved by the council at midterm. Congress recently approved another stimulus package, which included an allocation of coronavirus local fiscal recovery funds, coined the American Rescue Plan, or ARP, which includes an allocation to the city of West Sacramento of nearly $11.8 million. The funds are expected to be received in 2 tranches, with the first payment of almost $5.9 million expected to be received in the next few days. We actually received our email from U.S. Treasury today that they've received all our information, they've approved it, and they're going to send us the money. And the other $5.9 million will be received in 12 months. The ARP funds are available to be used for several purposes, including to respond to the public health emergency and its negative impacts, including assistance to households, small businesses, nonprofits, or to aid impacted industries such as tourism, travel, and hospitality, to respond to workers performing essential work during the pandemic, and for provision of government services to the extent that of the reduction in revenue due to the public health emergency relative to revenues collected in the most recent full fiscal year prior to the emergency. And also to make necessary investments in water, sewer, broadband infrastructure. So I've reviewed, the U.S. Treasury has released their interim final guidance, about 150 pages, a lot of great information on Monday, last Monday. And so I've been reading through that. They've got a very straightforward calculation on how you calculate lost revenues, which is how we've done it here for this report. Also, Measure E funds were utilized to supplement available CARES Act and CDBG funding toward the purchase of the roadway in as part of Project Home Key. So the chart on this slide shows the estimates for lost revenues and the Project Home Key expenses compared to the ARP allocation that the city will receive and when it will receive those monies. You can see that while the funds are certainly welcome and they do go a long way to helping make up some of the impacts to our city coffers of the pandemic, they certainly don't make it all up, and I don't think anybody was expected that. So we do recommend, staff recommends utilizing the ARP funds to reimburse to the Measure E fund for the expenses that they've incurred to replace lost revenues in the Measure E and Measure K funds, and to partially offset the revenue losses in the general fund. The amount that is expected to be available for general fund after making up the lost revenues and other expenses in the tax measure funds is estimated to be about between 9 and 9.5 million, which would replace just over a third of the total lost revenues expected through June of 2022. By doing that, this would allow previously delayed projects and other necessary projects that were contemplated but not appropriated because of the pandemic to move forward in this next biennial budget. So you will see several requests to utilize funds towards those purposes. To provide a little visual, this slide shows the general fund revenue projections in our long-term model prior to the pandemic versus today's projections. So the green line shows the revenue projections in the last long-term model before the pandemic. The purple line shows our current revenue projections. There's a little blip here that is just due to timing of receiving our sales tax revenues from CDTFA during their transition to a new system. And so I've provided this green dotted line to show, if we'd received the revenues when we were supposed to, there wouldn't have been that blip. But this is really what we're talking about, this difference here between what we would have received or what we expected to receive to what we've actually received and are projected to receive over the next year. And this is the amount, or this is what part of what the ARP funds are intended to cover. Let's see. You can see in this slide that the revenues at this point are projected to nearly recover by 22-23. So our revenue projections are still somewhat conservative and even a little arbitrary, given that we're still very much in the middle of the pandemic, and the recovery and how that's going to work are not yet known. I think we're getting better information every day. Every quarter we receive new revenues and see how things are going, gets us closer to understanding kind of what to expect in the future. And so I'm probably a little more conservative in my revenue projections going forward because we don't know what's going to happen. Over the next several months, though, we do hope to, especially as the economy reopens, the mask mandates and social distancing orders from the state are expected to be lifted next month. And so once we see what the following 1 to 2 quarters look like as far as new cases, revenue recovery, and other possible delayed impacts from the pandemic as assistance and the moratoria are lifted, we'll be better able to project what our recovery will look like and how our revenues might continue to grow beyond that recovery period. And so we'll be truing up these numbers as we do. We're always kind of looking at our projections and trying to improve upon them. So this next slide shows the same information, but overlaid on top of that is the what the revenue line would look like with the additional $9 to $9.5 million of American Rescue Plan funds over the next 2 fiscal years. So it does show that it's a blip in the revenues there and that it is intended to cover this other blip. Once you overlay so many lines, it's hard to see, but basically those funds will provide one-time money to allow planned and delayed projects to move forward during this budget. And that's what this is intended to show. So let's see. Before I move on to kind of getting into the budget itself and our process there, are there questions related to the slides I've just shown? And I'll also say I can't really see you guys, so just yell at me if you have questions at any time throughout the presentation. I'm happy to stop at any time. So this slide shows basically the budget instructions that were provided to departments and the assumptions that we used in developing the operations and maintenance budgets that are proposed today. The budget instruction to departments were to basically, the O&M budget is a status quo budget. It is to include any known or anticipated increase to continue existing service levels. And so that means, you know, PG&E, we're going to see an 8% increase. They assume that 8% increase in the budget. But we don't add additional funds for new things. If there are significant increases in any specific line item, if we're looking to change how a program or service is delivered, add a new program or service, or for one-time expenditures to perhaps purchase or replace equipment or vehicles, all of those are requested separately. So we've got the basic status quo O&M budget, and then we have our new requests. Once the requests are submitted by departments, they're evaluated internally by me and my staff. They're vetted through various budget committee meetings. We have one specifically looking at technology-related projects. We've got one that specifically looks at CIP that has representatives from the departments who deal with the CIP. And then also with a larger overall budget committee, which is made up from department heads in each of the departments, the CIP manager, the IT manager, and the assistant city manager. And then finally, we have meetings with the city manager to bring it all together and review everything and get ready for the proposed budget that is then presented to council. So our general assumptions that were used, we did add a leave payout appropriation in each fund that houses staff. That payout amount, the appropriation amount, was based on the 3-year annual average for employees leaving the city. So when an employee leaves the city, especially a long-term employee that might be retiring after many years, they've amassed a leave balance that we end up paying out to them when they leave. The same happens, but on a much smaller level when employees resign. And typically, when we go through the budget process, we try to get an idea of, you know, who's thinking of retiring in the next couple of years so that we can go and make sure that we've got budget appropriate for those costs. You know, it's hard. People who might be leaving not through retirement don't always know that might be happening. People who are retiring, you know, don't always know or you know, announce it publicly prior to the time. So it's hard to get that information when we do the budget. And so we've instead looked at our 3-year average and appropriated that in each of the funds to make sure that we are projecting our expenditures appropriately. The personnel budget also is based on our current employees and current pay, assuming movement within the range on their anniversary date. Vacant positions are budgeted at sort of a mid-range, assuming probably two-member health coverage, those types of things. It does not include any cost of living adjustments or appropriations for upcoming negotiations. But it does include our annual required contributions towards PERS, our pension, and our OPEB unfunded liabilities. And this year, there's also a reduction in our OPEB annual contribution due to the revised actuarial reports and the implicit subsidy included in the retiree medical insurance premiums. You don't need to know much about that, except that it counts towards our pay-go portion of required contributions. And so we were able to reduce our annual contribution budget for that reason. Let's see. All right, so this slide just shows the total budget requests by type and shows that the majority of the funding is requested towards capital projects and one-time requests, including significant use of grant funding. So nearly a quarter of all of the funding that is requested towards CIP projects is actually made up of grant funding, external funding. And total ongoing budget requests across all funds is about $2.5 million. You see that here, and that is less than 2% of the total operations and maintenance budget, just to put that into perspective. This slide, we're going to get a little bit more detailed into the general fund, and then move into some of the other types of requests. And again, as we go through this, feel free to stop me at any time if you have questions. Happy to answer them now or at the end. So for the general fund, this is the proposed operations and maintenance budget by category. So you'll see here, we've got the different categories of revenues. We've got our projection for the current fiscal year, 2021, our proposed budget for the next fiscal year, and the following fiscal year. You'll see there are significant increases in some of the revenue sources over the 2 years as we anticipate recovery of revenues with the reopening of the economy. Expenditure increases also in the first year are a little bit higher than what you might expect, and that includes the restoration of budget cuts made this year due to the pandemic, along with modest inflationary increases. The PERS increase in the first year is a large increase because it's from current year projections. It's actually a much smaller increase compared to the budget, about 6%, more in line with what you'll see in the second year here. And this is due to the significant savings in the labor line item due to holding positions vacant this year, including at least one department head position. But by doing that, experiencing those savings here, that does result in an increase in our unfunded liability, which will result in increased contribution rates going forward. So, but we do budget, like I said, assuming that all of our positions are filled for the entire year. And so you'll see that there's a bigger increase in our labor line items from our projections this year, and there are likely to be savings due to vacancies even into the next fiscal year. It's important to note that the general fund has a projected surplus of $700,000 next fiscal year and about $1.8 million in the following fiscal year, and that's before considering proposed budget requests. And a couple of things that I wanted to point out: we have increased some of our projections related to cannabis revenue. We've been very conservative in how we've budgeted that in the past. But now that we've got about 4 years under our belt and we can see kind of how things are going, we've increased that revenue projection for the next 2 years. All right, so I'm going to move more into detail. All right, so this slide shows the position and labor related requests included in the proposed budget. I've noted here so you can follow along, because I'm doing this at more of a summary level. The details of this are included in attachment 3 to your report, which are on page 101 of your of the budget workshop packet. So the total position related requests for the general fund result in about $323,000 in ongoing annual costs to fund 8 positions. Several of those positions, the costs of those positions are offset by equal or larger reductions in contract staff costs and charges to capital projects. And the total position-related requests across all funds result in an ongoing annual cost of about $266,000. I don't plan on spending much time in going through these at this point. So if you want to ask questions along the way, stop me. Otherwise, I'm going to keep going, and I'm sure you've got your questions noted for the end, but I'll take my cues from you. All right, this slide shows our total vehicle and equipment purchase and replacement requests, as well as the technology related budget requests by funding source. So the large annual ongoing request here in the General Support Services Fund stems primarily from a couple of sources. There are computer replacements, which are typically done every 4 to 5 years and require a large one-time investment at that time. I think it's every 4 years, and it's about 1.2 million, if I recall correctly from the last time we did this. And by replacing them every 4 years, it also requires a lot of staff time on the part of IT throughout that year to get them all ready and mobilized now to individuals, which reduces their capacity to be able to carry on IT projects and respond to other issues. We're actually proposing to transition from replacing all the computers every 4 years to an annual replacement of a quarter of the machines. Both to equalize the costs in our ongoing budget and then to equalize the work over the 4 years to ensure IT staff has capacity for continuing to respond to other projects and carry out other projects. To the extent possible, you may have noticed during the midterm, I know we talked about it then, and you'll see it in a couple of places here. To the extent possible, when we have one-time large budget needs every few years, and we have not been setting aside funding for those. And I'm trying to build in and annualize those. So whether it changes to an annual cost or whether it's setting aside an amount on an annual basis so that when we have to go replace whatever it is in 5 to 10 years, we have the money there to do it. You'll see a general shift to that kind of budgeting proposal. So that the computer replacement would follow along with that. The other large project is a phone system replacement. The phone system has been in place nearly 2 decades and needs to be replaced. I think the typical useful life is much less than that. And it also requires a very large investment every few years when it is replaced. It is anticipated that the new phone system could be cloud-based versus on-premise. There are a lot of changes to those types of phone systems. They both exist, but a lot of folks are going to the cloud-based. And those typically require a much lower upfront cost and a higher annual ongoing cost. We don't know yet what that cost is going to be. We're in the process. We've done the RFP. We're demoing systems right now and coordinating with the different vendors. And so we have been conservative in our budget request for this until we have better information. But that's why you'll see a larger ongoing cost there, because we are transitioning from a very large one-time output every few years to an annual cost potentially. And the detailed requests, like I said, for all of these are included in your budget packet. I talked about the vehicles. Oh, I've got, okay, I think I'm thinking of another slide. Perhaps I'm not. Okay, so under vehicles and equipment in the general fund, you'll see there's a 100,000 ongoing proposed, and that is related to replacement of a 2000, I think it's a 21-year-old pumper truck in the fire department. It's again a large one-time purchase, but we have proposed to finance it over the next 12 years. So you'll see 100,000 on an annual basis for the next 12 years to cover that. And in the one-time cost there of 400,000, that includes the replacement of, again, another 21-year-old brush truck and a 16-year-old pickup used for towing in the fire department. And so that's part of what makes up that 400,000 for the general fund. Okay. Overall, though, we are looking at about just under $500,000 a year across all funds for the additional requests related to vehicles and equipment on an ongoing basis, and a little over 900,000 for all funds for the technology related requests. All right. This slide shows the other one-time and ongoing requests by fund, so things that don't necessarily fit well into another category. The large request from the general fund here is not really a request to spend the funds. The city, along with the county of Sacramento, through various agreements related to the ballpark, Center Health Field, are required to backstop the annual debt obligations for if River City Companies is unable to make the payment. That has never been the case, but with the pandemic, we're probably closer now than we ever have been to having to do that. We've always budgeted for the potential cost along with an offsetting revenue budget, because if we were called on to backstop the debt, the city would ultimately be reimbursed. But it is likely that the reimbursement would come in a future fiscal year, meaning we need to have funds set aside to cash flow that obligation until the reimbursement is received. So like I said, because of the pandemic and the fact that minor league baseball was not able to operate in person, it is possible that the agencies may be called on to make bond payments in the second year of the 2-year budget. We hope that with the economy reopening next month, they will be able to generate sufficient revenues to cover those obligations, but the funds should be set aside just in case. And so these funds would remain in the long-term debt fund until the bonds are paid off, which I believe is in 2029, 2030. I'd have to double check that. And then they would be available for general fund uses. All right. The Measure G request is one that was already approved by council as an ongoing contribution from Measure G to a bank that would be used for fee assistance for certain infill housing projects that meet specific eligibility requirements. Those funds were not carved out or used in the fiscal year, and so there is a request to carry those over. And to create the bank, we've actually set up a separate special revenue fund. And so we're requesting council approval to move the funds that were approved in a prior fiscal year to that bank to be used in the future. And council approval would be needed to utilize and appropriate those funds in future years. So other ongoing requests total just under 600,000 in year 1 and a little over 800,000 in year 2. And of that, about 71,000 is the ongoing impact to the general fund. All right, so this slide shows the capital project requests by fund for the 2 years, both in a table format and in a pictorial representation. Total CIP requests are 42 million over both years, including 9.8 million in grant funding. So the net request for city funding is 32.6 million, and that's across all funds. I'll be talking about the general fund here in a moment. So let me just move on and we can talk about those. Oh, I guess that goes after the tax measures. Okay. So I do have just one slide here on the tax measures. Like I said, attachment 5 includes a lot of the details on both the ongoing previously approved council requests along with the new requests for tax measure funds. The tax measure analyses are included in that section, along with a table for each tax measure showing how the funds have been spent from inception to date by each of the categories and how the requests over the next 2 years fit into those eligible categories and compare with the annual targets. So for Measure E fund, the total budget requests are 2.9 million. Of that, 2.7 million is requested towards one-time and CIP uses, and about 100,000 in the annual ongoing budget. It does have an annual operating surplus of $2 million after funding the requests, and there's a projected available fund balance of $5.8 million after the reimbursement from the ARP funds. Measure K has total budget requests of $1.28 million. 1.25 million of that is for one-time and CIP uses, 15,000 ongoing. The ongoing annual surplus in that fund is about $500,000 after funding requests, and there's a projected available fund balance of about 300,000, along with a reserved fund balance of about 4.3 million for the future light rail operations and maintenance. In the Measure N fund, we have total budget requests of 3.3 million. Those are all towards CIP projects, and so that the fund will have a projected available fund balance of 6 million. There are no requests currently for Measure V, so we have not provided information on that fund. All right, so this is the general fund summary. So this slide shows the general fund summary both on an ongoing basis and a one-time basis. It shows that we start, like I said in a previous slide, with about 700,000 in available fund balance at the end of the first year. We've got ongoing requests of about $500,000, which include 300,000 in personnel related, 100,000 in vehicle and equipment, and another 100,000 in other ongoing costs. There's also assumed to be an allocation from the General Support Services Fund of about 600,000. Any requests that are funded out of the General Support Services Fund are allocated to other funds based on our approved cost allocation methodology. And of that, about 61% goes to the general fund. So we've included that in here to see what the full impact of the proposed budget request would be. It does show a slight deficit in the first year of around 400,000, but that is a short-term deficit because you see in the next fiscal year, we start with about 1.8 million in ongoing available funds to fund $500,000 in budget requests and 600,000 in cost allocation, leaving 700,000. For the one-time budget requests, again, we have a fund balance of about 10.5 million. Prior to funding those requests, we've got one-time requests of 1.7 million. Showing the breakdown here, the majority of that is that one-time request to transfer just under 1.2 million from the one-time general fund to the long-term debt fund to be held in reserve in case we're called upon to backstop any debt with the stadium. And there's about 4.9 million in CIP projects, and that includes both the CIP that is proposed to be funded with general fund and an additional 500,000 that would need to be transferred to the facilities fund to fund the proposed CIP projects in that fund. Again, there is cost allocation on one-time requests in the General Support Services Fund, so those are also included here, and it shows the ending fund balance. So we are projecting to have a balance of about 10.7 million after funding the one-time requests in both fiscal years. And again, it wouldn't be possible necessarily for us to reasonably fund some of these requests without receiving the funding from the federal government, the ARP funding. So we're definitely very, very happy about that. It does allow us to bring back and fund some of the projects that were previously funded that had to move out, or others that were just delayed, understanding that there was not going to be available funding during the pandemic. So that being said, I'm going to make sure I've hit all my notes on that slide. All right, so this slide shows the updated long-term model with the proposed general fund budget requests. And there are a few changes in this model from the last one that you received a presentation on last month. We've continued to evaluate revenues. With another quarter of revenues in the bank, we've been able to just reevaluate some of our revenue projections and increase projections in a couple of areas. I mentioned earlier the cannabis revenues. Historically, I've been very conservative in the assumptions for increasing cannabis revenues, just because we didn't have a lot of experience under our belts. We have actually we saw a much bigger increase this year than we expected. I believe we budgeted somewhere around 970,000, and we are expecting to receive over 1.2 million in revenues this year. And so I was able to increase those by about $500,000 a year going forward in this model. And miscellaneous revenues. So we have budgeted about $500,000 in miscellaneous revenues, and that includes reimbursements and investment earnings and things of that nature. We, looking at the historical trends, we have not received less than $1 million a year in that category over the past several years. And so I've been able to increase that as well in the long-term model. And so the model shows that after funding the budget request, there is a surplus forecasted through fiscal year 25-26 and an annual deficit thereafter, right? So anytime you see this revenue line that or the expenditure bars that go above the revenue line, that's a deficit. One thing to note, if we go back to the pre-pandemic forecast, we actually showed that we would have had sufficient revenues to fund the budget request through the entire 10 years. And so I think the hope is that as we recover and hopefully we'll see a full recovery in revenues by fiscal year 22-23, that you'll once again see these lines, the solid purple line kind of follow this dotted purple line. But again, we'll continue to evaluate that over the next few months. So we are still being cautious until the economy reopens and we have more experience upon which to base our projections going forward. We do know there are several items still not included in this model, including compensation adjustments for existing employees, future positions to keep up with the growing population and demand for city services, and funding towards vehicle and equipment replacement and facility maintenance, to name a few. But over the next several months, we'll be further evaluating our recovery projections, our unfunded needs, and capacity that may already be built into the model for compensation adjustments for employees to keep pace with the rising cost of living. And we will be back in front of council to bring some strategies to address those issues before we come back with a midterm budget. So that being said, I believe I'm near the end. The final slide here just summarizes the areas that we would love to receive your feedback, including the proposed use of ARP funds, the proposed O&M budgets, the supplemental budget requests, and a proposal that is detailed in your report to once again roll another fund into the general fund. So with that, I am, I believe, finished with my prepared presentation. And so I'd love to hand it over to council to ask questions or have discussion, provide feedback on any of the items in the presentation or the report.
Thank you, Roberta. That was a very full presentation. And I know there are a lot of details in each slide in our packet. And so with that, I mean, looking at each item, which is something we've done in our meeting where we probably got halfway through, which is why I suggest maybe having, which I appreciate, the opportunity for 2 workshops, because these are major budget expenditures, as you saw in the big expenditure line that we're taking a look at, and then the funding sources. And so just want to make sure that, you know, when we approve this budget, that it be something that reflects our policy, our vision, and also just providing the transparency to our community who is interested in making sure that anything we spend money on is in service to the community. And so I wanted to be able to spend, you know, more time to be able to provide that level of detail and understanding. Budgets are not easy to understand. A lot of numbers in there. And so just taking some time to be able to do that and then get to a point where we can approve a budget on time. And so with that, just wanted to hand it over to Council Member, and I see a hand up, but I can't see the name. Council Member Orozco.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I apologize, Roberta. During your presentation, I had to shut the camera off. We have a very major bloody nose that still needs to be responded to. So I'm going to make my comments brief, but I do want to comment on the presentation. Thank you very much for everything that you put into this presentation, as well as the documents that were provided to us. They're very descriptive. And I read through the decision packages and had a chance to ask a lot of questions before tonight's meeting, so I'll cut down a lot of the commentary. I will say that I am happy that we would, with the proposal to reimburse Measure E for Project Home Key, as well as Measures K and E and the general fund for lost revenues. And I also, I had a few questions with respect to how we were using some of the Measure E funds. I saw that the homeless camp cleanup with the 2 full-time positions in order to hire qualified staff that'll be working all year. And I know in previous years, we have edged away from trying to use funds from measures for salaries. We've done temporary with, for example, partial salary for our homeless coordinator out of Measure E, but had stated that we didn't want to make it a practice. I understand why this would be proposed under Measure E. I mean, in recent years, we have Measure E was created for the purposes of reducing the impacts and incidences of homelessness. But we've done a lot on the reduction of incidences with like Project Room Key, Home Key, downtown streets, the winter warming centers, and Yellow Food Bank and our eviction moratorium. But we haven't done as much on the reduction of the impacts, which would essentially be how our community has been impacted by the increase of homelessness. So, having someone there to do the additional park cleanups, it makes sense. I just am still a little bit hesitant to make Measure E the source of salaries. And so maybe we can talk about that a little further. I could see doing it for a short term, but I'd rather it be housed as I really do like to keep that money in Measure E and N for the purposes of more impacts of rather than supplanting salaries. Again, we could talk more about that later. I saw the new positions. I was given that we don't know where we'll be and that we want to tread cautiously. I had a question at first about what are we doing here with new positions? I understand that many of them, the costs will be offset by reimbursements or maybe contracts in the case of others. But there is one that I was actually very attentive to, and that was the rec center position. As my colleagues are aware, a couple meetings ago, we talked about the learning ladder and the direction we were going to take with respect to early childhood education in our city. And, none of us were on the council, maybe Chris Ledesma, our mayor pro tem, at the time that, the fight for the city's involvement in early childhood, came about. And that was Cindy Tuttle, and that was many other female leaders in our city that said, look, we need childcare and we need our city to take a position and back our play on this. And luckily for our council, they agreed. And we put ourselves in a position where we were there to inspire a movement there. Now, our council, we talked about this, and the impacts to the budget and the long-term sustainability was a bit of a question. And we ultimately made the decision to get out of the business, at least for now, because we had built out an infrastructure, so to speak, of different early childhood education providers throughout the city that could probably take over that need. But the need isn't fully met still. And so I had expressed, I don't want to get out of the business completely. It was my hope that maybe we could have reserved, some spots with, a new provider and make sure that kids in the city would have, rights to those spots and or maybe take on the employees that were working in the learning ladder. And I think my colleagues, including the mayor, agreed, our workers were at the top of our priority. These are people who have spent their lives dedicated to, some of whom have been spending years with the city in service to the city of West Sacramento through the learning ladder, and are highly talented and people that we don't want to lose. And so, just making sure that we found some way to retain the talent but also, it's hard to see that we're just, eliminating positions because, of course, it's a cost savings. And I never want to, and I'm sure my colleagues would agree, reduce very valuable employees to just a dollar amount. And that's not how we do business here. And so with that said, I didn't, this is a very difficult decision. And ultimately, given the fact that, I don't think we've met our need for childcare. I really am supportive of the position of the rec center coordinator. And I would even encourage my colleagues to consider a potential of using additional funds for a second, maybe even just I don't want to say pilot, but a shorter term position. Because not only are we in the process of building out all of these other childcare centers, there's still a need for, we all know, after school programs, summer programs, and opportunities for us to contract or work with Washington Unified to give, different kinds of camps and programs for youth in our city. And these could be supported by, commitments from Measure K, Measure E, or other grants that we've received. I know we at least got the home run got approximately $100,000 or $99,000 for programming that might fit, some of these types of efforts. But I think that when it comes to bringing childcare providers up to a particular level. Like we always talk about high quality early childhood education. I know we are doing stuff to have technical assistance with these organizations that are providing childcare, but having someone dedicated to the professional development and making sure that the quality of these providers is at top notch, and maybe even getting them together and talking about culturally appropriate services, including, we have an amazing immersion program at Alcorn. Maybe it's one of those situations where, we're trying to find a way to support Washington Unified and making sure that kids, who need more culturally appropriate services are getting that's those services provided. And so I would say, if I were to offer some direction to staff, it would be to support the rec center position as proposed, but also to look into other maybe one-time funds or dedicated funds for the home run program that could support maybe an additional staff member to do additional work within that realm. And even if it's like a 2-year program and until we get ourselves to a better spot, then we're not completely dropping the ball and saying, okay, sorry, good luck to you, parents who are missing out on early childhood. We're out of this business. So that was a big deal to me. And that all said, I also want to say I agree with the general long-term fund to hold as reserved. I think it's prudent to be prepared for debt payments if they're coming, but we haven't had a season. So it would be, good to planning to at least prepare and not have to respond to an emergency later with no funds to cover any debt. And lastly, I want to say that I appreciate that many of I'm being stingy because we have upcoming labor negotiations. We have needs that may be, we might not know about yet. We don't know what the future is going to bring. And so I want to be very conservative with how we're going to be dedicating, money to new programs and new positions. But I also understand that, we're going to get reimbursed for a lot of this through ARP. And I appreciate that is a unique time and a unique opportunity for some of these things, because otherwise we wouldn't be able to afford them. They wouldn't be on the list, is what I imagine. So thank you so much for allowing me the time to express that. I'm going to go respond to a bloody nose and I'll be right back. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Orozco. Are there any other questions from Councilmember Alcala or Mayor Pro Tem Ledesma? Councilmember Alcala, you want to go? Next, okay, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm looking at this budget very carefully, and I spoke with you earlier. I still have, I think I got through about a little more than a half. And I do have a lot of questions, so I'd like to be able to, write them down and then ask these questions at our next meeting, because there are numerous questions that came to mind. By the way, the cannabis revenues, where are those coming from? And how many shops?
There are, I want to say 4 shops operational now. There are several more approved development agreements, but once that we get an approved development agreement, there's a process they need to go through with the state and getting a site ready. And so I believe there are 3 or 4 that are operational now, and one of them is under a couple of different business models. So we do cultivation, distribution, and manufacturing, and so they'll report under which type of business it is. So I believe there are 4 operational now.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Sorry, just flash in there.
Okay.
I just wanted to be clear that in West Sacramento, just mainly for the public that may be curious about this too, we allow everything except storefront retail. So while you see in some other cities, they get revenue from retail sales of cannabis, our revenue is based on development agreements with mainly, I think it's distributor businesses, but as Roberta said, we do allow for an array of non-retail uses in the cannabis industry, and we receive revenue from a percentage of their gross receipts. So that's where that revenue comes from.
Okay, I was wondering because you said we had more than had been projected. I think you projected 900,000 and we got 1.2 million. Is any of that designated? I know that in Sacramento, there was a council member, I think it was Jay Chenier, who had hoped to have some of that revenue put in almost exclusively to, I think they had like a 4%, something like that, put into programs, youth programs. Where's ours going? Ours is the general fund? Is that where it's going, or where is it going?
Yes, it comes into the general fund as a revenue, and it supports the functions of the general fund, which are primarily public safety. We've also have a contract with HDL to perform audits and help with compliance with the businesses, and so that contract is also funded out of those revenues.
Yeah, right. There are other cities that have similar arrangements where they've actually dedicated some cannabis revenue to those purposes. We've always made the suggestion that, since it is treated as general revenue, it's the most flexible funding we have. If there's a desire on the part of the council to do programming like you're seeing in some other places like that, we would encourage you to kind of look at the prioritization of that type of thing, not, and not be tied to the type of revenue that it would fund, because it is general revenue. You can use it for a variety of uses. So that's the distinction between us and say Sacramento.
Okay, thank you. The River City Stadium, that's another thing that you just mentioned. It's a 1.2 million. Is that annual?
No, that is a one-time transfer of funds just to create a reserve that would allow us to fund our debt obligation if we were called on to do that. I can tell you that since 1999, we have never been called on to do that. They've always made their payments on time and have maintained the revenue fund and the supplemental reserve and everything the way they were intended to. But with the pandemic and the fact that they haven't been able to have a season, and then when they do come back to have a season, the folks who are season ticket holders have paid in advance, and so they've carried those over. And so the likelihood of receiving, revenues as they normally would in a regular fiscal year or regular year is it's less likely now when they reopen. And so this is probably one of the only times that we would even be contemplating this. There's really, outside of something like this pandemic and the closure of everything for a year, it wouldn't be likely for us to even have to make that payment.
Right. And when you say
at this point, it's still unknown. So,
and you meant the owners when you said you meant the owners of the River Cats.
There's a series of River City companies, River City Land Holding. There's a series of agreements and different entities that through those. But yes, it would be the River Cats.
Okay, great. And the vehicles that you're thinking of bringing on, those would be energy efficient, right? Maybe electric. I mean, we're all switching over, so I'm just sort of curious. There are too many questions that I have. So what I'll do is, there's so many items in the budget. I'd like to submit them to you, and then of course, perhaps we can ask them at the next meeting. I haven't completely read through this, so rather than take any more time, I think that's what I'm going to do.
Okay, yeah, that would be helpful. We do have all of the department heads, representatives from each of the departments too, because they are the experts on their programs and their budget requests. But we'd be happy to take those and make sure that we're prepared to respond to them at the next meeting.
Because you mentioned Measure K on light rail operations, so we don't even have a light rail right now, so that's money allocated within the next 2 years. So
it goes into a reserve, correct? Right. So that money's been contributed to a reserve that is still sitting within the Measure K fund.
Right, and the new phone system would be for City Hall, or is
for all city staff, regardless of where they're located.
Okay, so that would be an in-house thing, or are you talking about also cell phones that would be going out to the?
No, this is the in-house phone system. Yes, yeah.
Okay, I'll just reserve everything else for later. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Alcala. Mayor Pro Tem Ledesma.
Thank you, Mayor. So Roberta, thank you for the as always comprehensive and thorough look at our presentation tonight, and appreciate the opportunity for this workshop, and also for we spent a couple hours together yesterday, and appreciate you giving your time to me for that, and I'm sure there'll be somewhere along the line a couple more hours. So sorry about that in advance, but I do appreciate, as I said to you yesterday, just really appreciate having you at the helm, your command of the budgets and the funds and the intricacies involved and how we try to keep, all the parts of the city moving are just, they're impressive. So thank you for all your work. I also want just to make a few statements, and don't really I will have some questions, but I'll try to be brief. But also want to thank all the managers on the phone, the department heads, for their work. You kind of talked about the process, and you've brought that up to me before in both public comment and the previous budget review mid-year last year, and then in private, kind of how this works in terms of the department heads, each and every one of you wonderful people have to go back and look at your year, where your expenses were, and there's a very robust process to where you are vetting their requests, the city manager is vetting their requests, and everyone's evaluating impacts and where their priorities are, listening to our requests, our priorities from our strategic planning session. So just thank you for the not just thoroughness of what the presentation, but the robust process as well. To the public that doesn't get to hear that, it is important to understand that that's what occurs here. We're not making these numbers up out of thin air. There's a lot of work in the months that lead up to this that each one of these individual professionals are putting together about how to provide services to our city, what their investments need to be. So thank you all for your hard work. I think I would appreciate in this the overall approach that you took in this. And I appreciate the way you presented tonight on this budget, Roberta. And I cautioned yesterday a little bit about don't bury the lead. And the lead here is that, kind of twofold. One, yes, we are in a very good position compared to other cities. And I named some off that I've just researched that are digging out budget deficits and holes and looking at positions. You can just Google it up. The local and regional in California, cities across the state have been enduring some massive cuts. Some of them. You brought up your own city, Napa. They got hit right away because they're heavily dependent upon tourism dollars. I looked at other cities from Santa Cruz to Oakland to
LA, others that are really being impacted by really bad by the pandemic. And I said, don't bury that lead because it's the important part. But it also speaks really highly about how we've built an economy, a local economy that's diverse, that allows us to have multiple sources, not heavily dependent on one area, that allows us to sort of to have a conversation where we're still contemplating the investments we planned on. And that's a really good position to be, but it also is we should be raising a caution flag, as you rightly are, about what can we expect over the coming years, and your projection about what ongoing revenues might be in the general fund particularly is really important. And for the thousands of watchers on computer tonight or on television, it's hard to contemplate that, but that's the undercurrent of my comments tonight is caution, and I don't. There is still an air of where this pandemic, the recovery from it will land. I'm vaccinated. I think everybody on our council is vaccinated, and everybody is trying to get there in our city and trying to move into a place where businesses can open up. But it may be a while before everybody gets back to a level of growth and turning new revenue that we have confidence in. So I think it is right to be cautious. Your assumptions showed it. You didn't that you highlighted earlier in that staff were instructed, not told, they were instructed how to budget given those insights. And I think that's wise. And I appreciate that direction, and that you and the city manager and all the staff department heads have gone. And I want to say I'm particularly proud because this is something we have been talking about. When I started on this council, not to age myself, but it was the previous recession, and we had lots of conversations amongst council, among staff, about the right sort of culture we want to build. And I applaud the city staff because while I may have, I'm not going to quibble around the edges today about some of the budget package. There's some that I raised an eyebrow to, but there's some that I said, yeah, that's the right idea. And if we are paying a contractor X amount of dollars, and we can save money by bringing somebody in-house full time, and we get better expertise, somebody for our city, that's a good move. If we are, and some of those had those proposals, is that we would eliminate contracts, that we could at least reduce contracts that might lead to that. And that's the right thinking. In addition, some that were trying to articulate efficiencies they might gain from certain positions that'll mean that they could provide more service if they moved one position around to another or brought in another service. To me, that's the right budgeting culture that I'm looking for. And again, thank you for the budget direction on that. The approach you're taking with the ARP is the right one in terms of just trying to get to a steady state where we are backfilling investments that we had already planned on so that we can continue. I think Councilmember Roscoe brought that up. I think that's the right approach. But all of this comes still with an abundance, for me at least, abundance of caution, because your last slide was still showing that where our ongoing revenue might be. Granted, we're being conservative, but it falls below in the year 7, 8, 9, I believe it was. It falls below our expense line and creating deficits in the future. And that's something I'm particularly concerned about. And we have opportunities now to sort of look at that and making sure we make any adjustments where necessary, either through movement of funds or some of these other investments we've been making. We need to take a hard look at it. So the areas, and I articulated a few to you yesterday that we may want to look at, particularly is now the time to be making those investments ongoing to the general fund before we really have a good grasp of what our revenues will be. And I know that's an exercise you talked about getting to, trying to get to relatively quickly, right? There's a question in there, yes.
Yes, sorry. Yeah, in fact, I mean, we're continuing this work. It's not going to stop after tonight or after June 16th. There's a lot that we've talked about over the last several weeks and months that we'll be working on, immediately.
Right. And I think part of Roberta and to, I am, this is a workshop and we have to pass a budget in June. And have a budget in place. And I know we've done it before, where we've, if there are certain investments where, contributing to those ongoing expenses for the general fund, particularly. Before we say yes in June, before we have a good line of sight on what those revenues would be, are those things we could hold off on that we could say we're going to pass a kind of a steady state budget, and then if revenues, a little later in the year might get to a point where we can make some decisions on them, come back and say, okay, those are now, we feel a lot better about the 10-year projections, what it might bring in. Is that a process we can get
to? We because we're in this is for the 2-year budget and we don't already have a budget adopted, we do have to have an O&M budget adopted by the end of June. But the supplemental requests are things that that we can certainly come back with later. And in fact, we can take understanding that the general fund is of primary concern. Impacts on the general fund would be, a request included in that general support fund that are allocated. We can do the work to take a look at those, work with departments, figure out what are the things that are really going to be necessary to look at now versus things that can wait. And we can bring that list back for the council at the next meeting, the June 2nd meeting. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I was just going to chime in essentially that is our recommendation based on some of the feedback. And we're obviously not done here, but hearing that there are already more questions, understandably, because it is a big topic, a lot of items. And based on the feedback you just provided, I think I would hope it'd be helpful to the council to do exactly that, to ask departments to kind of prioritize the items, identify anything that really can't wait for some sort of service level need or other budget reason, and give you that information so that you can make the decision at that point and give us the direction. Do you want us to come back and do essentially a status quo O&M budget to keep things going, and take more time to evaluate what we described at that point as the supplemental. So we're prepared to do that, but we do have June 2nd. We can start to build towards that.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. And I know that's something I raised in our conversations as well. And prudence it could be the better part of valor, right? So I think, trying to get it all done and trying to get it, I think right now, at least my sense is taking that approach is if we can, if department heads can go back and sharpen their pencil about really where we can hold off or where we can, that would be the prudent move. And the last part is my sense from the staff and the team and all the good work you've had, and at least from my perspective, is this isn't a no from me. Kind of like no growth, no investments, no new staff to kind of help keep the city moving. There's a lot of good work in those budget packages and on trying to bring more services to our residents. And at the end of the day, that's the enterprise we have, is to have a at least my view, an organization that is really helping residents, whether it's through, as my colleagues have brought up, certain services, whether it's childcare, or how much do we keep to that, or some other services for our public safety or for parks, who, I appreciate them trying to bring back concert series and everything else on the waterfront. Those are all really important things that I'm not, I want to be clear that I'm not saying no to that kind of growth. I just want to make sure it's sustainable, and more so sustainable for everyone, and the team making sure we have the room. Councilmember Roscoe has it right. And we have all of you are represented in some way as we go through budgets and making sure every one of our employees and their families can be cared for. That's part of our role too, and having that flexibility or having that capacity to where we can ensure ourselves that we can continue to drive really robust services and value-added services for our residents efficiently, and also care for all of our team that we can provide for them is important to me. And it's just, and this is all about just ensuring that we have solid ground we're walking on going forward. So that's the nature of my comments today. Again, I'm not going to quibble on the budget practices, but it does represent, it is a big package of stuff. And I do urge, the public, if they want to read them, see the great work that our teams are thinking about internally, because there's some really good stuff in there, thoughtful and investments that help all of us. So those are my comments for today. Appreciate the feedback.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Ledesma. And Roberta and everybody, thank you so much for all your work. Presenting to us what you are seeing is important for the city to address. I have seen a lot of great recommendations here. And these are recommendations that, looking at the number of years, 20 years, where some things have not been addressed, and presenting an opportunity for us to take a look at it. And things like fixing the roads and, other infrastructure needs that, I have, established as a priority of mine to address. And I see that in here. One of the cautions that I think you're hearing among council members, our discussions and other presentations that we have heard presented tonight by Roberta is our fiscal outlook. And we want to keep our staff. We want to be able to keep people employed and also paid well. And I think that keeps us all awake at night wondering, could we accomplish that with our current budget, with our revenue growth? And, what can we do to take a look at, in the long term to support, ensuring that we can pay our employees at a competitive rate, and keep them employed here, and maintain the morale among, everybody here working in West Sacramento. Because if you're not paid well, then, you're not feeling well, and then you may end up leaving us. So we don't want that to happen. And I think all of us feel that way. That's incredibly important for us. So when we look at the budget, sometimes we look at the numbers or the direction it could go to impact that, to establish that consequence. So it's not because, we don't think what you're asking for is not important. It's more of, could we do without it? So, we can maintain, providing, good salaries for all of our employees. So that's something that I just want to make sure you can distinguish why we may take a look at some options here and a little more closely. In the holistic picture of the presentation here, I think the city has done incredible work over the last year and a half in addressing the pandemic and our COVID-19 recovery. Some of the things that I've seen the city staff work long hours and try to do what they can to provide the level of service, and then some, as we pivoted to, working out of home and being able to support your families during this time. And some of those who are essential workers trying to find, childcare or additional support for your families because your children were now at home, not going to school. And then, the storm happened and, we see people being negatively impacted by that. And then how do you work through that and, continue to do your job? So we've had a couple of, quite a few events. And then, the uprising due to systemic racism and the impact that's had both in, along our public safety fronts. And on top of that, the wildfires that happened and, that stress it put on, I think, all of us in some way or another because our air quality was bad. And, our department staff is, in public safety front was depleted even more so. And so I can't imagine, what you all went through. And I greatly appreciate all that you have done, to keep us stable in the city. And every time I see you, you're all still smiling and look like nothing happened. I'm very grateful for all of your support. So when I take a look at your budget asks, I keep all that in mind. Keep what you have been through and what you're asking for, because I think at this point, I don't think you're presenting something. I think you probably had a much longer list, which I completely understand. And Roberta and Aaron just had to collapse it and give us the shortest list possible, knowing what we know here as our long-term fiscal impact. So I'm definitely going to take into consideration all of that. And Roberta saw me looking at trying to move things around and different funding sources to try to make sure we can fund everything. And I'll continue to work with you, Roberta, on that, on some ideas. And I appreciate having a second workshop so that we can continue to have the dialogue on what's happening here. So hopefully we can, get everything done. I'm positive we'll be able to get everything done by June 16th for you. But I know it's going to be a workload for you on the back end, because it'll be less time for you to be able to put everything that we recommend for you to present back to us, for us to approve. And some of the questions that I've heard here among my council members, Councilmember Orozco, is the childcare and between Discovery and Learning Ladder. And some of the questions I've had was around subsidized childcare, if any of the two received any form of subsidized childcare through the county or any support from public subsidies.
Good evening, Mayor Guerra. I have Kaisa Miller available with us, and also Justine. I'm not aware of any funds provided directly to the programs, but families do receive some funds. And I don't know if Justine or Kaisa, you have any additional information on that.
Hi, this is Justine. I do have a little bit of information just in terms of last year, both Learning Ladders, because they stayed open during COVID, did receive $1,000 from our regional hub. That was a grant through our regional hub. And that was like assisting them with costs that had, for COVID mitigation. Additionally, there is another packet going to the county supervisors where they are asking for another infusion of money into childcare providers who have sustained losses during COVID. I don't imagine it's going to be a lot more than $1,000. So Tracy's absolutely correct. We do accept subsidies for children who attend Learning Ladder and Discoveries, and that would be through the county. And we also partner with the school district and with Shores of Hope, et cetera, the centers that provide and Head Start that provide subsidized care when families need that in West Sacramento.
And then do families also pay for any of the care that's received there out of pocket?
At the preschools?
At the both Learning and Discovery, just curious.
Oh, yes. Yes. We have tuition for enrollment in the program. And okay. I would say the majority of families are paying full tuition.
They are? Okay. So in the cost that we see here, are those costs offset at all by any of these revenue sources that that we're receiving, or is it just is it separate? Is there a separate pot of money where this goes in as revenue, and then, or is it just kind of like this is how much it costs on top of that revenue source?
Well, the revenues we receive, Roberta, I don't know if you can clarify.
We receive
all revenues.
When there are funds requested to supplement, they're requested to supplement the funds that we receive. So when you look at either Learning Ladder or Discovery, Learning Ladder, I guess being the best example right now, all of the parents, including myself, we all pay the tuition for our children to go. The tuition was increased a few years ago. I know it used to be even more affordable, but it's still a pretty good affordable rate. I think $900 a month was what I was paying with my daughter when she was going there. And so all the parents pay, and then we have. I'm not entirely familiar with your other revenue sources, but I think we bring all of those revenues in from the tuition. We have all of the expenses to pay the staff and provide the care and the supplies and everything else for the children. And it's the net difference between the revenues we receive and the expenditures to run the program that has been subsidized previously with contributions from Measure E, especially during the pandemic. So there are revenues. It's just that the costs of running the program are more than we bring in revenues.
I see. So what we're seeing here is the cost in excess of the revenues at this point.
Yes.
Oh, okay. I was kind of hoping for there to be a little bit of an overlap, but I guess not. Okay.
That's just discovery, though, just to be clear.
That's just discovery?
Right. Because Learning Ladder, we have the separate approach for the suspension on Learning Ladder. So the line item you see for the preschools, and someone correct me if I'm wrong there, but my understanding is just for discovery.
It is for discovery. Just both preschools have operated with a deficit almost since the beginning. That's grown a little bit over the years. Discovery typically has a lower annual funding gap, but we're being really conservative right now because we're hopeful that enrollment is going to return to pre-COVID enrollment rates. Every indicator that we have right now with the Discovery program is that it will, but we wanted to be conservative. And then in addition to our normal school year operations, we are proposing an extra 4-week-long summer program because our families have indicated a strong need to have something in the summer, this summer in particular, because the children have lost out on so much interacting opportunities. And so we included it to be conservative also, that summer program, in the second year of this 2-year budget, but we can certainly evaluate it. And if we feel that that's not necessary, that would lower the funding gap for the second year.
Okay, that's good to know. And I appreciate the background, Justine and Tracy, that, originally when this started, we had very little childcare available. At the time, I recalled that, there being a gap. And then we've gone up to about 800, childcare slots. I don't know if it's all full-time, part-time, flexible time. But if you have any data, I'm interested in learning more about that. And I'm also interested in learning more about how much of those childcare slots are subsidized childcare slots, if any at all. I think the county can provide some level of statistics on which ones are subsidized. I just want to make sure we have a good supply of that before we start closing anything down. And that I think it takes a lot of work for a subsidized childcare slot to qualify. For example, the YMCA used to be eligible for a subsidy, but it has since lost its permit or something happened. So they are having to re-up that. And it could be over the period of COVID that I think we need to provide that additional support or boost so that we can expand the eligibility for the subsidy. I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that.
Well, I was going to mention, we have, when you say we have around 800, that is high quality preschool spaces. So those are going to be both part day and full day. All of our Washington Unified preschool spaces are half day at this time. We used to have a mix of half day and full day, but we now have all half day in our state preschools. In our Head Starts, we have almost all full day because they, in exchange for using the campus, the school campuses from Washington Unified for free, they do a non-compete. So they don't offer part-day preschool, they offer full day. And they do that by weaving together funds from state preschool and Head Start. So families need to be able to qualify for Head Start to use those. Shores of Hope also provides full day high quality preschool. And then the majority of our high quality preschool that's more affordable for families is going to be found at our family childcare homes that we've worked with for many years to get them to that point where they are offering a high quality preschool space. So when you talk about childcare, we actually have more childcare spaces than just that, because those are the preschools that have participated with us. They offer a preschool program and they have worked with us to improve their quality. So there's more childcare in general than that. As an example, we have one center in town that doesn't work with the program at all. So they have, I think, 92 spaces or something. We have infant, toddler, and preschool spaces. They just don't happen to work with us. So that would be more childcare that's available. We can't vouch for the quality of it because they don't work with the program. But we have plenty of, we also have many family childcare homes that do not at this point yet work with us, or they're working with us, but they haven't reached the high quality point yet.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah. And there's definitely a lot of the family childcare homes, especially the ones in the neighborhoods where a lot of families would qualify for subsidized care, do provide, I know one or two that provide, they might have 10, they're serving 10 children and 8 of them are on county subsidy. So they get subsidized care. In other words, they're just collecting. So I think there's quite a good deal of that. There are limits to what is offered. There's not always enough to go around. So families that need that full day care are not always able to get it, even if they qualify.
I see that. Yeah, that's another challenge in itself. Okay.
Yes.
I do think that as parents, I could see that happening anytime soon. After June 15th, once things open up, we'll see a surge as Tracy mentioned, requesting childcare. And so glad that you're staying open just a little bit longer just to provide that level of support. And I don't know if it'll modify, we'll probably know a little more later, if it'll modify the spacing in these placements in these childcare locations. But if it does, increase the capacity, I'm hoping for the, vaccine for younger kids to be available so parents feel more comfortable to be able to go back to work, and leave their kids in a childcare setting. So thank you for that background on that. It makes me feel a little better. I know Learning Ladder is a valuable resource in our community, but I do see that we do have a supply of, and I don't know if you can tell in that supply whether there are empty slots available, so there are vacancies. And if there are, being able to refer families that are participating in Learning Ladder to be able to get referred to others.
Yes, thank you for that. We certainly will work with the families. We've already extended the offer. Right now, next week we'll be having graduation, and after the graduation ceremony with our preschoolers, we'll have 6 families remaining. So it's a very small group of families that we would be working to try to find other opportunities for childcare services for. And of those 6, I'm not sure if any of them have subsidized care.
Okay, thank you, Tracy. I wanted to ask another question, Roberta, about the ARP funding. So in looking at the ARP funding to help address our general fund gap of 25 million, which is a significant number. It's a number I hadn't heard in our past discussions, but I think the number came as a result of the ARP guidance that we received and being able to quantify the general fund gap. I think that's what I heard you say.
Correct. I still need to do additional calculations. That was a very rough calculation based on the guidance. The way I had been calculating it before was just a very, very strict conservative estimate of, they said pre-pandemic levels. And so I took 18-19 and said, if we had revenues in any year lower than what we received in 18-19, that would be a loss, even though we knew we had expected and anticipated increases in growth in those revenues, particularly sales tax, where the Wayfair decision and the increased revenues related to out-of-state sales tax that is now collected kind of coincided with the pandemic. And so it was really hard to quantify that loss. But But yes, there is the interim final guidance that has come out from the U.S. Treasury that I'm still evaluating. And so a lot of what was provided today are estimates and current kind of understanding, but there's a lot to dig into with that guidance.
Okay, thank you. I would feel more comfortable if we consulted, I think, with the Treasury Department who's issuing the guidance, or even the U.S. Conference of Mayors has had multiple art presentations on how to expend our funding. I hadn't heard of this as an option in those discussions. Maybe nobody's talked about it or asked those questions and they were going to do it. They had already planned on that, but it is an eligible use and maybe it was brought up. I mean, it's such a flexible funding source from what I've heard. That was the initial, points that I've heard. But what I've seen in the expenditure of the ARP funding is to address, COVID-19 recovery. And I do see some of that in the projects that are being planned, or, some of them that are been postponed may not be related entirely because COVID had not been in existence before. But I do want to just take a look at, if we go back, and we received an audit and we have to go back and explain our situation, just want to be, making sure we can, qualify for or pass that audit. And
that's my job 100%. I mean, I definitely make sure that that before we spend any funds that they qualify. I did mention, and I got it straight off of their website, and I attended a briefing with the White House and the U.S. Treasury on the day they released the guidance to go through these, and through my office, I'm president with the League of Cities Fiscal Officers Committee, and so I've been working with the League of Cities and through their work with the National League of Cities on this as well. So I think there's still before we do expect to receive our first tranche of funds within the next couple of days. We have a special revenue set aside for those to go in, and they will not leave that fund until we are 100% certain that that the uses are eligible. So when it comes to lost revenues, they have said that really any projects, continuation of government services, any projects that are related to that would have been funded with general fund, and you're now replacing the lost revenues, those are available. Those types of projects were not listed as specifically eligible projects for use of those funds if you didn't experience those lost revenues. So that's kind of the difference. They did specify specific types of projects, water, sewer, broadband infrastructure that are eligible or uses of those funds. There is, though, a little bit more general allowability if it is related to lost revenues. So, but we will absolutely make sure that we are covering all of our bases on those and not utilize any of those funds until we have all of our ducks in a row. And the U.S. Treasury folks have actually been very responsive and wanting to work with folks. They ask a handful of questions within that guidance as well, because they want our feedback to make sure that that those funds are going to be useful for cities. And so we'll absolutely work with them as well, just to make sure that we've got a good understanding of the rules.
Thank you, Roberta. In taking a look at the difference between the O&M and the CIP in the package you gave us, I think the O&M is in the first half of the packet, and then the CIP is the second half. And that's kind of like the first half is the budget decision package. That's the part that you would like. Those budget decision packages is what you would like approved by June 16th, correct?
Well, really, I think the city manager had mentioned, based on Council Members Ledesma's recommendation, that perhaps we look through not just decision packages, but what decision packages or capital projects need to be funded prior to waiting a few months, and we would bring that list back to the council at the next meeting to consider. There's likely to be a handful of both capital project requests and decision packages that may need to be funded sooner rather than later. But those that can be delayed to allow for additional discussion and additional understanding of the revenues that are going to be coming in, we would be able to delay those until after the July 1st day.
Yeah, that's correct. And just to be clear on that, what we're suggesting is by June 16th, we need to adopt our standard O&M budget. So kind of the carryover budget, if you think of it that way. All of the existing budget allocations that we have currently would carry over essentially into the 2-year. And everything you're seeing in decision packages right now are all new requests. So like Roberta said, some of those requests can likely be delayed. Some may need to, in our opinion, may need to move forward on, with the fiscal year. And so we'll be very clear when we come back how those items stack up, both like Roberta said, both mainly on the decision packages, but also on the CIP. I think we can look at the same test on those. They're a little different because they're one-time in nature, or they're within those 2 years, versus some of the decision package have ongoing impacts. But we're going to definitely scrutinize them on the general fund, especially, and we'll give you a picture of those decision packages and some of the CIPs. Are there any that we can put off until we have a clearer picture of both revenue in a few months? And also, I want to take this opportunity to note in the report, we've mentioned it a few times, staff is going to be doing a lot of work, and by staff I mean mainly myself, Roberta, Amanda, and we'll pull in a few other staff. But we need to give the council more information about the long-term picture, both from a projection standpoint, but probably more importantly from a policy standpoint. Are there things that we can come up with that are policy decisions for the council to weigh that provide the ability to give more flexibility, more capacity potentially for the general fund to meet some of those gaps that we talked about tonight with both maintenance and of all types, but also we've heard a few times considerations for long-term growth in staffing, but also in compensation to keep pace with the market. And I think that was very appreciated for us to hear, to know that it's a priority for the council, but also that's going to take some work, and we are going to take some time given the feedback to do that. So that's also part of what we'll do in the meantime before we bring back some of those decision packages that can wait, if that makes sense.
Yes, I think that would really help a lot for us looking at future expenditures and things like that here. I am also interested, I think looking at a bigger picture. I've seen, going back 1 year, but I wanted to take a look at a longer term, by expenditure, by, funding sources. And, it's like a balance sheet that provides maybe in the last 7 years, so that I can just see a trend of where things have been spent. And then that way, and even if there's one for salaries, by department, if that's possible.
Yeah, I'd love to get your list of what you're looking for. If you're looking for that for each fund, that will be harder to do. I definitely have that for the general fund. So if we're talking general fund, yes, I've got data for 20 years that I can give you.
Okay, yeah, that would be great. In the general fund, so I think in the general fund category, you have property taxes and sales tax and other small funding sources related to that. So I just wanted to see the differences in what dipped the most, what was the most impacted, during the closure of COVID and of our businesses and things like that. And, and I know when you have your projections, everything's blended in there. So I'm just trying to figure out what's the one that's lagging and, dragging compared to where we were before. Because when looking at the state budget, and you can't compare the two, or even other cities, because I think our city is less reliant on sales tax, which is why we did so well. During COVID, we taking a look at the state, and having such a huge surplus, and then their revenue projections, looking at the sales tax looks fairly positive. And I think other things have an impact as well, but it looks really positive for the state general fund. So I just wanted to get a sense from ours, breaking it up a little bit. What is impacting, when you see those lines, it's all one general fund. But there are other funding sources that I'm curious to know, in the planning of the future, as Councilmember Orozco referenced, we're budgeting for a couple of FTEs in there. And if the sales tax is going to be the one lagging, then like that same little bar, is the expenditure going to be hitting and impacting that in the long term so that we can understand that. But I don't want you to do that for every funding source. I just want to understand in the general fund, which has the sales tax, if that is the one that's causing, that line to hit towards, where we see in 26, 27, a deficit. And so just trying to identify which funding source is causing that.
Well, it's a combination of multiple funding sources. And I think the primary ones right now that are impacted are TOT and our charges for services. Those are two that have been definitely hit hardest. Sales tax, we have not seen the decline that you would expect because of the Wayfair decision that required certain out-of-state retailers to start collecting and remitting sales tax on out-of-state sales. And that happened at the exact same time that the pandemic hit and there were closures. And so folks, it really mitigated a lot of those losses in the sales tax line item. But I do have that data. I have it by category. I can send it to you and you can take a look at that. I don't think it's going to be easy enough to see what you're trying to see if there's one in particular, but I can tell you that there are a couple, the charges for services and TOT have been hit the hardest.
Yeah, and I'll just add that in the staff report, there's a chart that kind of demonstrates the long-term model, but just want to let you know that there is a much longer form of that. It's a spreadsheet that Roberta has been updating that has all that information, that has the historic trend, but also the projections under each category. And we're happy to share that with the whole council as a more detailed form of the chart that you have in your staff report. So you can see kind of where those projections are, both historically, but also 10 years ahead.
Okay, great, thank you. And also, Roberta, I think the governor allowed for, it's not everybody, but certain businesses to delay, for the sales tax. And so did that have an impact in our general fund?
Sure, but not hugely. I know we received some data from CDTFA, and they have a public online portal that you can go and take a look at as well. And I think they're including some of that information. Overall, sure, that it was for businesses that have sales tax or revenues under 50,000, so they're smaller businesses, and there was some delay. But for a city our size, we didn't see a lot of that. And I could reach out to CDTFA and understand a little bit more about the percentage of folks that took advantage of that. But it's not something that had a significant impact, I don't think, on our sales tax revenues. And it's a timing issue more than anything. They're just paid a little bit later.
Yeah, they are. Okay, just wondering if that'll help give us a bump in the future, if that was included as part of the estimate.
Not specifically as a separate piece in our estimate. However, I will tell you, Uni Services, so we contract with Avenue, formerly Uni Services, for our sales tax projections, and they take all of that into consideration. So they look at, and they've got the data on the businesses that have taken advantage of the grace period for paying, and they include that coming back in the future. And we use their projections for our future projections for sales tax. So I'm sure we can get a little bit more of that information from our consultant.
Okay, great, thank you. And then the question about I had was the delayed projects. I know it's all in the decision. Is it all in the decision package, the delayed projects, or is it in the?
I believe the CIP summary attachment 4 provides an asterisk for a few projects that were delayed during midterm, that were appropriated by council, delayed during midterm, and brought back at this point. I know that at the time we were doing midterm, we didn't know about other projects. There were others contemplated that are now being brought forward that probably wouldn't have without the ARP funding. But there are a handful of general fund projects like the City Hall reconfiguration, the facilities, vehicles, and equipment master plan. There was a turf to water conservation planting, another small one for parks and recreation. But there are a handful, 4 or 5 of them that are, there is an asterisk with a note in attachment 4.
Okay, thank you so much. I do recall those.
And if we go back to the midterm, I identified those as well as we were going through the evaluation. It's public record. It's going to be in the report from midterm 2 that I can provide to you, where we identified the ones that we thought would move forward, be delayed out into future fiscal years to free up general fund money. So that was in that report as well. And I can get that to you.
Okay, great. Thank you. I appreciate that. All right. And then, if we can set up a time to meet again, just to go over all this in the near future so that I can ask additional questions. I do want to say that I do appreciate seeing in the budget some of the discussion items we've had in the last year in our park master plan for Bright Park. I do know that overlaps with Washington Unified School District's property. And is there a relationship with how that's going to get funded? I do know we talked about it. We also talked about it in our 2x2. Is it a permission to be able to do the upgrades, the ADA upgrades, and then, or is it a combination of sharing of the expense?
For the Bright Park improvements as proposed in the decision package, they're on the property that the city controls. We provide an update to the board to let them know that we're moving forward with the project, but it's part of our joint use agreement. The city wholly funds those improvements. So there is no cost share for any of these improvements for that project.
Okay, good to know. Thank you. And then, just want to wrap up, and thank you for all your hard work in this, Roberta. I know you've spent a lot of long days and nights packaging this up for us. And sorry for asking so many questions here tonight. Just this being, my first full budget, want to make sure that we get everything done, and appreciate all the information you're sharing here with us today. So.
If you didn't ask questions, I'd be a little concerned because there's a lot in there. And if especially being newer to the city council, it's a lot. It would, So I appreciate the questions. I'm happy to answer them. And it's not just me. I think, we've got a great team here of folks, both in my department and in all of the departments who've worked together on pulling these together, who have responded late at night when I'm asking questions as I'm pulling things together, and who will inevitably be the ones that are going to provide the best information to you too on your questions. So I appreciate that, and thank you for the discussion and for the clear feedback tonight. And I look forward to meeting with you again on this on June 2nd and potentially before.
Yes, for sure. And I will be sending questions where maybe you can direct me to staff who can possibly give you the answers as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Okay, I have not opened it up for public comment yet, so I want to be able to open this up for public comment. We received some items in writing at this moment. Are there any other requests to speak, Madam Clerk?
There are no speakers, Mayor.
No speakers. Okay, closing it up. Public comment, bringing it back to council. Any additional questions or wrap-up comments or thoughts? No? Okay. Next item on our agenda is the council calendar.
Good evening. So I have a couple of items tonight. On June 8th at 11:30, there's a ribbon cutting for the Better Meat Company, and I believe y'all have been invited to that. And then later that evening at 5 o'clock is going to be our State of the City event at Sutter Health Park, hosted by the Chamber of Commerce. That's it for me. Thanks.
Thank you, Amanda. And our city manager report.
Yes, thank you. So first I want to just reiterate all the nice comments from the council directed to Roberta and the staff. A lot of work goes into preparing that 2-year budget. It's not like our midterm check-in, and we only do it every 2 years. So just wanted to say thanks on behalf of the staff for those comments. I did want to just kind of highlight that I'm going to be sending you all an email probably later tonight. Just kind of as we look ahead to gauge the council's timeframe on planning a return to actually having in-person meetings. We're going to be looking at a hybrid model where we can still provide public participation remotely, but we'd like to think we're getting to a point where that's going to make sense. Just to give you just a high-level update, we're looking to do a full reopening of City Hall because most of our city facilities are in some capacity already fully returned. City Hall is kind of the exception, but all of our staff facilities, we're hoping to bring back services once school is out, and we're looking towards kind of the end of June for that time frame. But that's still in the works. We're working on all other sorts of policies regarding work schedules and that sort of thing. And you're hearing this all over the region. So we're doing a lot of that same, in case you're wondering. But in terms of in-person meetings, I just want to get the council's feedback on that. So I'll be seeking that soon. But I think other than that, that's it for me tonight. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. City Attorney report?
I've got nothing to report.
I like your background. Thank you. Staff direction from City Council members? No staff direction. Future agenda item request by council? No future agenda items, and accept a motion to adjourn.
Mayor, I'd like to adjourn in the memory of Supreme Court Justice Cruz Reynoso, who died about 2 weeks ago.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Alcala.
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Orozco. And Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor Pro Tem Ledesma.
Aye.
Councilmember Orozco.
Aye.
Councilmember Alcala.
Aye.
And Mayor Guerrero.
Aye. And with that, we are adjourned. Good night, everybody.